Chapter 25:36. Chunzong was surrounded by the endless sword rings of the Cyclone Dragon Lock formation. He had to bear the attacks of the sword rings. Each sword ring was the amalgamation of many sword rings. Each sword ring possessed astonishing power, giving off a feeling of indestructibility. The sword rings carried an astonishing binding power. 7 Profound Swordsmanship. 36 disciples of the 7 Profound Swordsmanship sect formed a formation and performed the 7 Profound Swordsmanship. The combination of the profundity and power of the 7 Profound Swordsmanship became even more amazing. Chunzong performed the Heart Swordsmanship to the extreme. He grasped everything around him and became clearer. However, because his perception became clearer, the feeling of being bound and oppressed became more obvious. It was as if there were enemies in all directions. In the formation, Chunzong could not see the disciples of the 7 Profound Swordsmanship sect at all. All he could see were the sword rings. The sword rings condensed from the 7 Profound Swordsmanship emitted dazzling light and filled the surroundings as if they were endless. Chunzong felt as if he was trapped and could only struggle continuously. This struggle was getting weaker and weaker. If this continued, it was very likely that he would be bound and suppressed. However, not long after, Chunzong felt that the attacking pressure had weakened a little. Although he did not know why, he knew that this was his chance to break the formation. Outside the formation, Hao Ming did not make a move, but his face was cold. The power of the 7 Profound Dragon Lock formation was extraordinary and extremely mysterious. It was not so easy to break it. Even if someone attacked from the outside, it was extremely difficult to break it unless they were extremely strong. However, looking at the disciples of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, although their strength was not weak, it was still difficult to compare with him. With such strength, it was still difficult to break the 7 Profound Dragon Lock formation. In this way, the person in the formation would be bound and would be at the mercy of others. Hao Ming even thought that he would bind him, capture him alive, and torture him ruthlessly. Only then would the hatred in his heart be relieved. Even though Gu Rui and the other disciples of the 9 Heaven Imperial Court took action and dispersed a portion of the 7 Profound Dragon Lock formation's power, Chunzong was still the main one bearing the brunt of it. Within it, he was still bearing an extremely strong pressure. The dazzling sword ring seemed to be endless, constantly attacking from all directions. It was like a long river surging endlessly, like a violent wind blowing endlessly. There was no end to it, as if it would continue until the end of time. Chunzong's strength was limited. At first, he could still resist, but as time went on, it became more and more difficult to resist. All of a sudden, a sword ring appeared and wrapped itself around Chunzong's left arm. It shrouded Chunzong's left arm and contracted in an instant, as if it was going to cut off Chunzong's left arm. Explosive power. His sword also arrived in an instant. His swordsmanship was like a dragon, and its power was tyrannical. It immediately shattered the sword ring. But more sword rings bombarded, making Chunzong feel flustered for a moment. There were too many, too dense, endless, and endless. Although the heart swordsmanship could sense the surroundings and grasp their trajectories, when a number and power reached a certain level, it would still have a serious impact. This had already exceeded the control level of the entry-level heart swordsmanship. Even so, Chunzong was not discouraged. Instead, he was tenacious and unyielding, constantly waving his sword and performing the heart swordsmanship. The heart swordsmanship was fully operated and would not be affected. This allowed Chunzong to better resist the sword rings. This sword should be like this. This sword should be like this. Even though he was at a disadvantage and resisting was very difficult, he did not give up. Instead, he kept resisting and using this to hone himself. Everything could be honed, but even so, Chunzong felt tired. His strength was constantly being consumed, and so was his mental strength. He became more and more exhausted. That kind of exhaustion went straight to the depths of his spirit. A sense of powerlessness gradually spread and swept over him like a tide. Chunzong felt like a dehydrated fish about to suffocate. It was extremely uncomfortable. Give up. You're so tired. It's just a futile struggle. It was as if there was a voice from the depths of his heart. It sounded like a sigh of vicissitudes. Give up. Don't fight anymore. It's useless. Give up. Have a good rest. Give up. A voice with vicissitudes of life constantly sounded from the depths of Chunzong's heart. The voice was faintly discernible and intermittent, as if it came from the endless void. It seemed to float into Chunzong's ears from the outside, but it also seemed to ring directly in his ears. For a moment, Chunzong could not tell whether it came from the outside or from the inside. However, Chunzong could clearly tell that the voice clearly came from the bottom of his heart. It was a voice that came from the depths of his heart. When he listened carefully, it was clearly his own voice. It was as if he could no longer hold on in the depths of his heart and was advising himself to give up, to not resist, to not struggle. It was all in vain and a waste of energy. You wanted to give up? It's absolutely impossible. Chunzong did not speak, but responded to the voice that kept telling him to give up with his thoughts. Give up. It's just a futile struggle. The voice continued to sound. Chunzong knew very well that it was not a voice from the outside world, but a voice that truly belonged to him. It was because the pressure from the outside world was too strong, and it caused him to be too tired. It was similar to the existence of an inner demon. If he obeyed it, he would relax, but he would also be bound and captured alive. If he did not obey, he might be exhausted because of it. In serious cases, he might even die because of it. That kind of death was not the death of the body of the divine form, but the death of his consciousness. It was a real death. However, Chunzong did not hesitate at all. Without any consideration, he eliminated the former and chose the latter. All along the way, Chunzong had faced countless difficulties, hardships, and setbacks. He'd faced countless life and death situations, yet he'd never given up. He'd never even had the thought of giving up. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. His heart was so firm this time. An indescribable sharpness grew in his heart. Like a peerless divine sword, it slashed out and directly obliterated all the bewitching voices into nothingness. The moment the voices were obliterated, the sword also seemed to have cut through something. Vaguely, Chunzong seemed to hear a cracking sound, as if something had broken. As the cracking sound rang out, waves of enlightenment surged into his heart and spread out. In an instant, the 10th divine mark of the way of the heart also condensed. As soon as the 10th divine mark of the way of the heart was condensed, it rapidly condensed at an astonishing speed. It was almost tangible, and the aura that spread out became even more mysterious and powerful. Then, the 10th divine mark of the way of the heart and the 10th sword mark approached each other and fused together. Its power increased explosively again. At the same time, Chunzong felt that his heart sword technique had also improved. It had broken through that boundary. Small success. The heart sword technique had improved from the beginner level to the small success level. The feeling of controlling the surroundings more than doubled in an instant. Vaguely, Chunzong felt as if he could control the surroundings. In the past, the feeling of control was just a pure feeling. In fact, it was an illusion because his perception of the surroundings had become clearer. But now, Chunzong knew that it was not an illusion. It seemed that he could really affect the surroundings. Using his sword technique and the heart's sword technique to guide, he caused the surroundings to be affected by his sword technique and move according to his will. Of course, it was very subtle. Chunzong swung his sword. Instantly, the trajectory of one of the sword rings shifted slightly. That slight shift seemed to be extremely slight, like the slight flapping of a butterfly's wings that brought about an imperceptible breeze. However, that gust of wind was able to unleash an extraordinary power. At that moment, Chunzong felt that he was playing chess. The swordsmanship was the player, the sword rings were the chess pieces, and his heart was the way of chess. At first, Chunzong felt that it was very difficult. But as he worked hard, he gradually affected the sword rings around him. The sword rings seemed to be endless and kept attacking, but they could no longer pose a strong threat to Chunzong like before. Gradually, Chunzong felt that he could move freely. It was as if he could control the world. The sword rings were like chess pieces. They were shifted by his swordsmanship and swept past him. They could not hit him. Chunzong even thought about whether he could affect the sword rings around him more strongly and make them consume each other. But he found that it was difficult to do. With his current level of swordsmanship, it was still difficult to do. He always felt that his power was not enough. Chunzong knew that it was because his level of swordsmanship was not enough. But it did not matter. As long as he continued to practice, he would reach that level sooner or later. As for now, although he could not make the sword rings cancel each other out, it was enough to affect them. The sword rings could not really hit him, and their threat was reduced several times. While performing the heart swordsmanship of the small success realm, Chunzong looked for flaws. When the heart swordsmanship reached the small success realm, the way of the heart and the way of the sword were both at the low realm. After the fusion, the power of Chunzong's sword was even more powerful. If the heart sword technique at the entry level could be said to have the power of a rank 1 profound martial art, then the heart sword technique at the small success level could be said to have the power of a rank 2 profound martial art. Every sword had the power of a second-order AO Wu, but the power consumed was only at the level of an ordinary swordsmanship. It was undoubtedly amazing. With the heart swordsmanship of the small success realm and the heart sutra, Chunzong gradually created flaws. The fall of the heavenly river. The moment the flaws appeared, Chunzong broke out with his strongest sword. The deep blue sword light turned into the water of the heavenly river, as if pouring down from the sky. It was so mighty that it seemed to be able to destroy everything. It was unparalleled and invincible. Now, Chunzong had 2 moves of the 10th order AO Wu. One was the fall of the heavenly river that came with the heavenly river sword, and the other was a sword attack of divine will that he created himself. It was originally called Hymn of the Wind, but after Chunzong completely digested what he had learned from the Small Way Manual, he upgraded it to the 10th order AO Wu level and renamed it Hymn of the Wind and Rain in the Pavilion, which suited his experience in the Small Way Manual. In the current situation, Hymn of the Wind and Rain in the Pavilion was obviously not suitable. The fall of the heavenly river was more suitable, and its frontal power was stronger. Chapter 25:37. The dark blue sword chi was like a surging river. In an instant, it erupted with an extremely violent might. That kind of violence was not inferior to the imposing manner of the fierce divine wind slash. Moreover, it had an advantage that the fierce divine wind slash did not have, and that was its endurance. Violence and continuity intertwined into one, turning into an extremely tyrannical power. That sliver of weakness was instantly magnified by this sword strike. After the heavenly river overturning, Chunzong attacked again. The fierce divine wind slash was unleashed, and the dark blue sword chi expanded the flaw. Although the influence from the outside wasn't great, it was still a force that couldn't be ignored. With a sudden attack, Chunzong killed his way out of the 7 profound dragon lock formation, and the 7 profound dragon lock formation was thus broken. The formation has been broken, the spectators exclaimed one by one. Just now, under the 7 profound dragon lock formation, the sword rings were endless. They could not see the situation inside, and did not know that Chunzong had broken through. Now that they saw Chunzong's sword break out of the formation, the sword chi surged and filled the air with an indescribable, terrifying power, causing everyone to be shocked. Hao Ming's face was also full of surprise. Even if he used all his strength, he could not kill his way out of the 7 profound dragon lock formation. Shortly after, a sword chi bloomed in front of him. That sword chi was extremely fast, but there was an indescribable nimbleness. Its trajectory was difficult to distinguish, and it was mysterious and unpredictable. It was difficult to judge. In addition, Hao Ming had not recovered from the explosion of his divine intent, so his reaction was slower than usual. This was the difference between life and death. In an instant, the sword Qi arrived and directly avoided Hao Ming's sword, piercing through his divine image. Kill! Hao Ming's face was full of ruthlessness, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The divine image's body rapidly faded, leaving behind a wisp of divine image essence, which was instantly absorbed by Chunzong. Turn around. Kill. Facing the 7 profound sword sect's disciples, Chunzong's sword did not have the slightest mercy, and his killing intent was shocking. Heart sword art was unleashed, and the 7 profound sword sect's disciples' swords could not touch Chunzong at all. On the contrary, they were constantly killed by Chunzong. One sword, one step, one kill with each step. He was merciless. Originally, although these 7 profound sword sect disciples weren't weak, there was still a gap between them and Chunzong. Now that Chunzong's Tao of the Heart had broken through, and his heart sword art had broken through from the initial stage to the initial stage, not only had the might of his sword art increased, but it had also become more profound and unstoppable. Even Hao Ming was no match for him, let alone others. Go! Seeing their fellow disciples being killed one after another, some people couldn't help but feel extremely terrified, and they hurriedly wanted to retreat. Trying to leave after coming here? A 9 Heavens Imperial Court's disciple laughed loudly and blocked his path. He couldn't escape. With a few disciples of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court obstructing them, the disciples of the 7 profound sword sect were simply unable to escape. Moreover, Chunzong's speed of slaughter was extremely swift, and every strike of his sword was unstoppable. Under the gazes of everyone present, the 36 7 profound sword sect disciples were all killed by Chunzong, and the 36 divine phenomenon essences remained on the spot, causing everyone to covet them. Yet no one dared make a move to seize them. There was no other reason, as Chunzong's strength was too strong. With a sweep, Chunzong instantly took away 18 divine phenomenon essences, leaving behind the other 18. Senior brothers, do you dare to take them? Chunzong's gaze swept past as he spoke to the few disciples of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. Why wouldn't I dare? In that case, I won't be courteous. Kindly accept. Instantly, the 18 divine phenomenon essences were divided equally, and everyone was very satisfied. Of course, they wouldn't have any objections if Chunzong took all the divine phenomenon essences, but sharing half with them would make them feel happy, and they felt that Chunzong wasn't a bad person. 37 7 profound sword sect disciples were all killed. Although it wasn't true death, the impact was very great. After all, they had dispatched 37 people to deal with a 9 Heavens Imperial Court's disciple. In the end, not only were they unable to kill the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's disciple, but they were all killed instead. Of course, the other disciples of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court had helped, but the biggest reason was Chunzong. He defeated Hao Ming, broke the 7 profound dragon lock formation, and killed everyone. Such strength, methods, and temperament were truly frightening to the extreme. For a time, Chunzong's reputation spread throughout the divine phenomenon secret domain, the gathering place of the 9 Heavens mortal realm, and also in the 9 Heavens universe. Subsequently, the information about Chunzong was also dug out. A human from the 3rd sequence void under the jurisdiction of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. This background instantly caused countless people to be extremely astonished, because such a lowly background could actually possess such astonishing strength. It was too shocking, especially his sword skills, which were even more superb. Chunzong's fame spread throughout the 9 Heavens universe, but it also brought great trouble, and the 7 profound sword sect wouldn't let it go just like that. If it was just a little loss, it wouldn't be a big deal, but now it wasn't just a little loss, it was a big loss, especially when they were in an advantageous position. But they were killed instead, which was a big blow to the 7 profound sword sect's reputation. Although such a blow was nothing to a colossus like the 7 profound sword sect, the 7 profound sword sect had always been overbearing, and no matter if it was a big loss or a small loss, they weren't willing to suffer. Moreover, Hao Ming also wouldn't let it go. If we can't deal with him in the mortal realm, then let's wait until he enters the low realm. This was the original words of a low-realm disciple of the seven profound sword sect. After Chunzong refined the 19 divine phenomenon essences obtained from killing the seven profound sword sect disciples, his divine phenomenon body became more condensed, and he was even closer to reaching the pinnacle. Killing proved one's strength, and strength established one's status. One man and one sword killed 37 profound sword sect disciples, letting everyone know that Chunzong was powerful and not to be trifled with. Therefore, Chunzong was unimpeded in the mortal realm of the divine image secret realm. In the tomb of weapons, Chunzong held the Milky Way sword in his hand, constantly searching for divine phenomenon essences to kill and unceasingly obtaining divine phenomenon essences. With his superb strength, Chunzong's speed of obtaining divine phenomenon essences was astonishing. Finally, when the 1 month was about to end, Chunzong successfully condensed his divine phenomenon body to the pinnacle, and the next step was to break through. It wasn't easy to break through, and it was either comprehending and obtaining an opportunity to break through or using external forces to break through the shackles. No matter which one it wasn't easy. When the time was up, Chunzong left the divine image secret realm and returned to his body. This time, Chunzong entered the divine image secret realm again, but this time he entered with the body refining divine phenomenon body. This was Chunzong's first time entering the divine image secret realm with the body refining divine phenomenon body, and it felt different from when he entered with the chi refining divine phenomenon body. The surging energy in the divine phenomenon body was less agile and light, but more vigorous and heavy, and there was a faint domineering aura in the air. Chunzong couldn't feel the heart Tao at all, only the power of the world Tao and sword Tao. However, the power of the world Tao couldn't be compared to the heart Tao, and it was only able to condense 9 divine runes. However, his heart Tao divine rune was improved in the divine image secret realm. Perhaps the 10th divine rune of the world Tao could also be improved in the divine image secret realm. Entering the divine image secret realm with the body refining divine phenomenon body. On one hand, he wanted to improve the body refining divine phenomenon body to the limit of 90 feet, on the same level as the chi refining divine phenomenon body. On the other hand, Chunzong wanted to find an opportunity in the battle to make a breakthrough in his basic sword arts to the Great Tao sword arts. This time, he didn't want to make a breakthrough in the heart sword art, but a sword art that combined the world Tao and sword Tao. It could be called the world sword art. Chunzong didn't feel complacent just because his heart sword art had broken through to the small success realm. Above the small success realm, there was the great success realm and the complete realm. Chunzong even felt that the illusory sword king, Mo Wui's illusory sword art, had surpassed the complete realm. In addition, if he could master another great Tao sword art, it would only be beneficial to him. There was no harm at all. Different great Tao sword arts had different powers, and the more he mastered, the more comprehensive he would be. With the experience of comprehending the heart swordsmanship, it might be easier to master the world swordsmanship. In this regard, Chunzong had been comprehending it for a long time and had some ideas. Now he just needed an opportunity, a suitable opportunity. Without mastering the world sword principle, Chunzong's body-refining godly form was not as powerful as the chi-refining godly form. Therefore, the efficiency of killing weapon form could not be compared to the chi-refining godly form. Fortunately, the Milky Way sword could be used by both chi-refining godly form and body-refining godly form. Even now, Chunzong could still remember the feeling he had when he comprehended the heart sword art. Now, he had to find that feeling again. Since he already had the experience once, perhaps he didn't have to go out and train like before. Perhaps he could do it in the godly form's secret realm. Inside the tomb of weapons, Chunzong held his sword and fought fiercely with an armament. He did not use the Heart Sutra, and he even stopped the battle directly. He only relied on his own instincts to fight fiercely with the armament to strengthen that touch. Compared to when he broke through the Heart Sword art before, it felt more gradual. Every fierce battle would strengthen Chunzong's feeling. When the feeling reached the extreme, it might be time for him to break through. Accumulation. Continuous accumulation. 3 soldier forms were besieging Chunzong. They were all sword soldier forms, as if they were swordsmen holding swords. They attacked Chunzong from the front. One sword was heavy, one was elegant, and one was strange. They had different styles. After all, the strength of the body-refining divine forms was not as strong as that of the chi-refining divine forms. For a moment, Chunzong was in a difficult situation. He felt heavy pressure and endless bombardment, but Chunzong withstood it with amazing tenacity and kept accumulating. The feeling he had when he broke through the heart sword art was getting stronger and stronger. Chunzong felt countless inspirations exploding in an instant. Like a flood breaking through a dam, it was unstoppable and broke through all obstacles. Layers of mystery also emerged in an instant. Boom! Chunzong slashed out with his sword again. The 9 sword patterns and the 9 divine marks of the world merged in an instant, turning into 9 even more powerful divine marks of the Great Path. They burst forth with unparalleled power. It was as if the sword carried the tyrannical power of a world as it bombarded directly. Domineering, vigorous, heavy. The power in an instant directly sent a sword soldier flying. It cut a long sword mark on the ground with irresistible force. The power was so mysterious and amazing that it had reached the level of the top first level AO Wu. Chapter 25:38. After a month, Chunzong's godly body hadn't reached the maximum level yet, but that was normal. After all, the godly body of a Qi cultivator was much stronger. It had taken him a few years to reach the maximum level. Fortunately, Chunzong's godly body had mastered the world sword technique. In terms of attack power, it was close to the initial level of the heart sword technique. The heart sword technique and the world sword technique were 2 different types of Great Tao sword techniques. The heart sword technique was mysterious because it could sense everything around it and influence it. As its cultivation level increased, its influence would gradually increase. In the end, it could really control everything around it. The world sword technique was mysterious because of its power. It was vigorous, heavy, aggressive, and terrifying. It was most suitable for direct attacks. After the godly body of a Qi cultivator left the mysterious world, Chunzong entered the mysterious world with the godly body of a Qi cultivator. As Chunzong was about to leave the gathering place of the continent of the 9 clouds, 2 people came and stood in front of Chunzong. What advice do the 2 of you have? Chunzong's footsteps paused, and he asked unhurriedly. With the strength of the godly body of a Qi cultivator, it would be difficult to find a worthy opponent in the mysterious world of the mysterious world. They probably weren't there to cause trouble. Mr. Chunzong, don't misunderstand. We don't have any evil intentions. On the contrary, we have a very good thing for you, said one of them. One of them said with a smile on his face. The other one didn't say anything, but his face was cold. Please speak, said Chunzong. He wasn't enthusiastic, but he wasn't cold either. Mr. Chunzong, have you heard of godly image source? Asked that person. When Chunzong heard that, his eyelids twitched. Guru A had told him about the divine image source. It was a power above the divine image essence. It was not on the same level at all. The divine image essence could only make the body of the divine image more condensed. Although it was possible to break the limit with this, it was very difficult and required a lot of accumulation. Godly image source was different. Once a cultivator absorbed and refined godly image source, they could break through the limit and reach a higher level. Therefore, the divine image origin was very attractive to everyone. This was because the effect of the divine image origin was immediate and there would be no side effects. However, although everyone wanted to obtain the godly image source, it was difficult to obtain. Since ancient times, there had only been 3 cases of people successfully obtaining the godly image source in the godly image secret realm. Of course, there might be others who had done it secretly, but it definitely wouldn't exceed 10 times. divine aspect essence could be easily obtained, but the difficulty of obtaining divine aspect origin was more than 10,000 times, or even more than 100 million times. Now, someone was actually talking to him about the divine image origin. Could it be that there was a way to obtain it? Please go ahead. Chunzong didn't answer whether he had heard of it or not, but said straightforwardly, "It seems that you know about the God image origin." The man continued with a smile. "By the way, my name is Bufong, and this is Jiangping. We've discovered a divine source, and there's hope for us to obtain it. However, just the two of us aren't enough, so we plan to invite a few top fighters to join us." God image origin. Chunzong was very tempted. Thoughts flashed through his mind like lightning, and in the end, he agreed to Bufong's invitation. It wasn't easy for him to break the limit and raise his godly image body to the level of the lower realm. With his own cultivation and accumulation, he didn't know how long it would take. However, if he could obtain the godly image origin and refine it, he might be able to break through the limit and raise his godly image body to the level of the lower realm. Chunzong naturally wouldn't miss such an opportunity. However, after agreeing to Bufong's invitation, he didn't act immediately. This was because they still had to invite other top fighters to ensure their success rate. They didn't want to waste their efforts. Chunzong didn't wait long. 3 days later, Bufong came to the Nine Heavens Pavilion again to invite Chunzong. Bufong and Jiangping invited 3 more people. In total, there were 5 people. Chunzong was one of them. One of them was called Bai Chao, and the other was called Long Chia. Other than Chunzong, the other 4 were all from the Origin clan. Among them, Bufong and Jiangping were rogue cultivators. However, they were prodigies among rogue cultivators. They were top fighters at the level of demigod generals. Bai Chao came from a powerful force called the Valley of Thousands of Medicine. Although it wasn't one of the 9 great overlords, it was a powerful force that was second only to them. It was also famous in the 9 Heavens universe for its superb ability to refine elixirs. Even the 9 great overlords treated it with respect. Long Chia's background wasn't ordinary. He came from the Thousand Blade sect, one of the 9 great overlords. All 5 of them were top fighters. Each of them had the strength of a top demigod general. Compared to Chunzong, the others had become famous earlier. However, their fame was accumulated bit by bit. On the other hand, Chunzong's fame seemed to have happened overnight. Chunzong's famous battle was when he single-handedly killed 37 disciples of the 7 profound sword sect. One of them was even a top fighter, Hao Ming. This battle was carried out under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Although there were a few disciples from the 9 Heavens Imperial Court helping him, the real main force was Chunzong. This battle had established Chunzong's illustrious reputation and established his status as a top fighter. These people did not have the slightest conflict with Chunzong, nor did they have any conflicts. They themselves were not ordinary people. Naturally, they would not be jealous of Chunzong. They would not find Chunzong an eyesore for no reason. The first thing they did was to mock and suppress Chunzong. There were many people like that in the world of cultivation, but most of them weren't like that. This was especially true for those who had cultivated to a certain level and reached a certain level. They had a deeper understanding of this principle. There is no such thing as love or hate without a reason. If there was love or hate, there must be a reason behind it. It could be a conflict of interest, a life and death grudge, or a battle of personal feelings. After the 5 of them introduced themselves to each other, they got to know each other. Everyone, next, Jiangping and I will lead everyone to the source of the godly image. Let's make things clear first. Jiangping and I were the ones who discovered the source of the godly image. Therefore, we will take 20% of the godly image source. The remaining 80% will be divided into 8 portions. Everyone will get at least 1 portion. The remaining 3 portions will be divided according to your contribution. How about that? Although they hadn't gotten the divine image source yet, or even seen it, it was necessary to agree on everything in advance. Otherwise, when they really got the divine image source, there would be disagreements over how to distribute it. This would lead to violent conflicts and even resentment. That wouldn't be a good thing. Hearing Bu Feng's distribution plan, everyone's thoughts turned, and they all agreed in the end. This kind of distribution at least guaranteed that everyone would get the divine image source. As for how much they could get, that would depend on their own ability and contribution. Those who worked hard would get what they needed. It was such a simple and unpretentious principle. As for why Feng, he and Jiang Ping didn't get 20% more, that was also reasonable. After all, they were the ones who discovered the godly image source. That was the value of information. Although it was said that the divine image origin usually existed in the core of the gathering place of the divine images, the core was not small. Whether one could find it was still unknown. Moreover, the core was incomparably dangerous. If one wanted to enter it, they would have to risk their lives. Since everybody agrees, let's go, said Bu Feng with a smile. They left the continent of the 9 clouds. Long Shan. When they arrived at their destination, everyone was shocked. The dragon form was one of the celestial manifestations of the myriad heavens, and it was one of the stronger celestial manifestations of the myriad heavens. Similarly, the danger level of the dragon aspect abyss was also higher than the other god image gathering places. This would undoubtedly increase the difficulty of obtaining the divine image origin by a lot. However, when they thought of the amazing effect of the divine image source, everyone still stepped in without hesitation. Here, even if they died, they would only lose a wisp of divine image essence. It could be completely replenished when the time came. However, if they could obtain the divine image source and refine and absorb it, they could directly break through the limit and increase their divine image body from 90 feet to 30 feet. It would be a huge improvement. The reward and investment would be too much. It was completely worth the risk. Even if one time didn't work, they could do it a few more times. In the dragon aspect abyss, the dragon aspects of more than 30 feet were patrolling everywhere. They were filled with astonishing power. When they discovered Shenzong and the other 4, they immediately let out a vigorous roar. Their momentum was astonishing, and they instantly charged towards them. If they wanted to enter the core, these dragon aspects couldn't be avoided. Everyone, why don't we compete and see who can reach the core first? Long Xie laughed. Then let's compete. Since we want to compete, let's have a prize, said Jiang Ping, who was always quiet. Don't hurt the harmony, Bu Feng said with a smile. Then let's bet on the divine image essence. The first person to reach the core will win. The loser will each give 100 wisps of divine image essence. Long Xie, who suggested the competition, said with a smile. 100 wisps of divine image essence. Sure, 100 wisps of divine image essence sounded like a lot, but it was actually not much. With their strength, as long as they took some time, they could kill 100 celestial images and obtain 100 wisps of divine image essence. This kind of bet wouldn't hurt them. However, if they could win, they could obtain 400 wisps of divine image essence at once. If they refined and absorbed it, it would allow their divine image body to become more condensed. Even if they couldn't use it, they could sell it or contribute it to the sect. In short, there was no harm in it. I have no objections, Bai Chao said with a smile. I don't have any objections either, Chun Zong said calmly. This could be considered a little fun. If that's the case, let's begin. As soon as the words left his mouth, the 5 of them unleashed all of their abilities. In that instant, their movement techniques exploded out, and they shot forward at an astonishing speed. However, if they wanted to reach the core, it wasn't just about speed. This was because along the way, they would be blocked by the dragon aspects. Hence, if they wanted to reach the core, they had to break through the dragon aspects. How could they break through the dragon aspects? Body movement techniques and speed were one aspect. Another aspect was strength. Of course, if one's body movement techniques were good enough, it was possible to avoid the dragon aspects and reach the core without fighting with them. However, it was too difficult. Chapter 25:39. I thought I had already refreshed myself, and then I happily brought Eva to the training class. What a fool. With the minor accomplishment of the Heartsword art, Chun Zong's perception of his surroundings had reached a whole new level. Even if he did not use it, he would be able to sense everything around him even more clearly. He would be able to predict what would happen and react accordingly. Dodge or counterattack. Chunzong's godly form of qi had been condensed to the pinnacle of 90 feet. In terms of strength, he was not inferior to the other four. His perception of his surroundings was extremely clear, and even the slightest influence made Chunzong feel like a fish in water. Without drawing his sword, Chunzong did not intend to use it to kill the surrounding dragon phantoms. Instead, he relied on his own ability to continuously dodge and move forward. Unknowingly, Chunzong had surpassed the other four and was at the forefront. Suddenly, more than a dozen dragon phantoms surrounded Chunzong from all directions. They were densely packed, and they directly surrounded him. One after another, they exploded with astonishing power. The terrifying power intertwined, as if they wanted to tear Chunzong apart. Such a dense attack made the scalps of the other four go numb. They knew that it would be difficult to dodge and could only stop and fight. This is a good opportunity. Long Chie's eyes flashed. As long as Chunzong was surrounded by more than a dozen dragon phantoms, the number of dragon phantoms he would face would be reduced, and the pressure would be reduced. At that time, he would be able to overtake him. Take the first place. The first place would receive 400 godly form essences. That was not a small amount, but to the others, it was only a matter of a few days' time. What was more important was the sense of accomplishment. The five of them were all top experts, top heavens pridelings, and top divine generals. If they could beat others, they would invisibly nurture a wisp of confidence. This kind of confidence was subtle and difficult to perceive, but it had an effect that could not be ignored. The accumulation of confidence was good for settling down. It was an invisible influence. Like wine, the longer it was drunk, the more beneficial it would be. The next scene made Long Xie and the other three dumbfounded. Chunzong didn't even unsheath his sword. His body seemed to be soft and boneless, like a willow in the wind or a bamboo in the wind. He easily dodged several attacks. It was light and agile, giving off a feeling that everything was just right. It was as if the dragon phantoms and Chunzong had already planned and rehearsed this countless times, deliberately not hitting Chunzong. However, that was impossible. The only explanation was that Chunzong had dodged all the attacks of the dozens of dragon forms. He had dodged them perfectly. If he had dodged them a little more, he would have passed, and if he had dodged them a little less, he would have been hit. It just so happened that everywhere was often the most difficult, and the comprehensive ability displayed was astonishing. Chunzong's movements were as smooth as flowing water. It was as if he had entered a realm where no one could stop him. He avoided the attacks of more than a dozen dragon forms. At the same time, his speed did not decrease in the slightest, making it impossible for the four people behind him to catch up. It seemed like a long time, but in reality, it was very short. In just an instant, Chunzong had passed by more than a dozen dragon forms and continued to move forward. Behind him, the dragon manifestation chased after Chunzong, unleashing an endless barrage of attacks. However, none of them managed to land a hit on Chunzong. It was as though Chunzong had eyes on his back. With a sway of his body, he effortlessly dodged the attacks. He can still do this. Too shocking. All of them were amazed. Even so, the four of them still tried their best to catch up. They would not let Chunzong get first place. Brother Chun, you are indeed powerful. Bufang gave Chunzong a thumbs up. I will give you 100 God's essence in a few days, said Jiang Pingling. Lung said, Chunzong, let's find a time to have a duel. Long Chie's eyes shone brightly. Bai Chao stared at Chunzong with some curiosity, as if he wanted to see through him. We'll see. Chunzong responded faintly. He did not seem to be very interested. This was because Chunzong could sense a threat from Long Xie, but it was not very strong. In other words, Long Xie was not weak, but he could not really threaten Chunzong and force Chunzong to unleash his potential. This was the core area. The aura here was much stronger and more violent than other places. Everyone, you should have heard of the dangers of the core area. Bu Fong said, but I wonder if you have personally entered the core area? I have thought about it, But I haven't, Long Chia answered directly. Chunzong and Bai Chao shook their heads. Indeed, the dangers of the core area were well known. However, they had not experienced it themselves. Even without the invitation this time, Chunzong still planned to enter the core area. He wanted to test how dangerous the core area was. Even if he died, it wouldn't be a true death. Of course, he couldn't miss such an opportunity. Jiangping and I have personally entered the core area before. It was because we were chased in the core area that we accidentally discovered the location of the god's origin, Bu Fong said with a smile. This could be considered a blessing in disguise. The core area is just like the rumors. The god's forms in the core area are half a level higher than those outside the core area. They're all very strong, and there are many of them. They are extremely violent and dangerous. However, with the 5 of us, if we cooperate well, we should be able to reach the god's origin, Bu Fong said with certainty. However, the most dangerous part is reaching the origin of the godly avatar. There are many powerful dragon avatars guarding the origin of the godly avatar. It will not be easy to seize the origin of the godly avatar. When the time comes, a fierce battle will be unavoidable, Bu Fong said with a grave expression. If we work together, we will definitely be able to obtain the god's origin. Long Chie's eyes shone brightly, and he looked very confident. Let's go. With Bu Fong and Jiang Ping leading the way, the 5 of them immediately went deep into the core area. As expected, the dragon forms here were even more violent, and their strength was even more tyrannical. They were close to, or even at the top level. However, the strength of the 5 of them was not to be underestimated. With the intention of working together, they resisted and killed the violent dragon forms. However, there was no difference in the god's origin. This was also the reason why many people were not willing to enter the core area. The risk was great, but the benefits were not proportional. Kill, kill, kill. The violent dragon forms were continuously killed by the 5 of them. Gradually, the 5 of them went deeper into the core area. The god's origin is in there. Bu Fong pointed at the hole in front of them. The hole was a few meters wide, and it was pitch black. It was like a black hole that swallowed all life, and it made one's heart palpitate. Enter. As they went deeper, they felt as if they were going deeper and deeper into the ground. Along the way, the group did not encounter many dragon forms. The underground cave was very complicated, and there were many forks. Bu Fong and Jiang Ping had left marks before they left, so they did not get lost. With so many forks, it was easy for one to get lost. If one wanted to find the location of the god's origin, one could only rely on luck. Moreover, even if one's luck was good, one might not be able to find it. When the 5 of them reached the deepest part, they felt an extremely violent aura spreading out. That kind of aura even caused everyone to be shocked. Looking through the hole, everyone could see huge figures in the middle of the cave. The dragon forms outside were about 100 feet long, but the dragon forms here were more than 200 feet long. Although the strength of the god's origin was not absolutely related to the size of the god's origin, in many cases, the bigger the size, the stronger the impact and threat. Moreover, the strength of the dragon forms was indeed closely related to their size. In the middle of the cave, there were more than 30 dragon forms that were more than 200 feet long. Any one of them had the strength of a top subdivine general. It was very terrifying. Chunzong and the other 4 also saw what seemed to be a fist-sized light source in the deepest part of the cave. It was emitting a strong but not dazzling light that shone in all directions. The aura it emitted was extremely pure, and it caused Chunzong and the other 4's god's origin bodies to have an instinctive desire. They wanted to get their hands on that light source and eat it. It was as if they had seen a peerless delicacy. God's origin. It's really the god's origin. Even if Fong and Jiang Ping had not seen it before, they still felt an indescribable excitement and ecstasy when they saw it again. That was a treasure that could allow their god's origin bodies to break through the limit and upgrade to the next level. It was countless times better than the god's origin essence. There was no comparison between the two. Get it? They had to get their hands on that fist-sized god's origin no matter what. The 5 of them looked determined. Their eyes seemed to be burning, and their hearts were also burning. The god's origin, the treasure was right in front of them. Since it was right in front of them, they could not miss such an opportunity. However, in addition to discovering the fist-sized god's origin and the 30 dragon forms that were more than 200 feet long, they also saw that behind the god's origin, there seemed to be an even larger figure. Because it was covered by the light of the god's origin, it was not very clear. However, they were certain that the figure's body was definitely more than 200 feet long, or even 300 feet long. The figure did not wander around like the other dragon forms. Instead, it crept quietly, but it had a feeling that it was as solid as a mountain. It was incomparably heavy, and the aura it emitted was also incomparably shocking. It vaguely gave people the feeling that it could shatter the vacuum. It was extremely terrifying. The shocking power and the faintly discernible threat that directly threatened their divine souls immediately made the 5 of them look grave. Treasures were usually guarded by powerful exotic beasts. This was a common principle. The situation in front of them now seemed to be the same. Although the 30 dragon forms that were more than 200 feet long posed a great threat, it was still possible for the 5 of them to get rid of them if they worked together. However, the threat that was brought about by the even larger figure behind the god's origin was the most shocking. It was extremely frightening. As they stared at it, not only did they feel a shocking pressure sweep over them, but also made them feel a deep sense of powerlessness. It was as if they would be killed immediately if they were to become enemies with it. There was no chance at all. "Everyone, you must succeed," Bufong said with an incomparably serious gaze. They took deep breaths and adjusted their mentality to get rid of that kind of influence. If they thought that they were not a match for it and strengthened it, then they would be affected, and it would be difficult for them to display their strength. Their essence, chi, and spirit were raised to the extreme. Their eyes shone brightly, but they did not rush in recklessly. They had to break through it one by one with a plan. First, they set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2540. More than 30 dragon forms, each of which was over 200 feet long, exuded a strong aura. They were not easy to deal with. If they rushed in recklessly, the 5 of them had little chance of winning. Even if they could kill all of them in the end, 1 or 2 of them would die. The most terrifying figure was also inside. Once they entered, it was inevitable that it would be alerted. What should they do? After some discussion, they reached a consensus that they should attract the dragon forms and defeat them one by one. Then, who would attract the dragon forms? Brother Chun, among the 5 of us, you are the most agile. If Brother Chun attracts the dragon forms and defeats them, then Brother Chun should get an extra share of the divine image origin, Bufong said. Okay, everyone agreed after some consideration. After all, Bufong and Jiangping each got a share of the divine image origin. Among the remaining 8 shares, everyone could get another share. The remaining 3 shares would be distributed according to their contributions. Let Qinzong lure the dragon forms and defeat them one by one. Qinzong had to take the risk now. If he was not careful, he would be surrounded and fall into a dangerous situation. He might even die because of it. Qinzong certainly would not miss the opportunity to get an extra share of the divine image origin. Qinzong's body moved and swept out like a gentle breeze. His breathing was subtle and his movements were light, making it difficult for others to detect him. His body also stuck close to the mountain wall, as if he wanted to merge with the mountain wall. Under the light, it was even more difficult to discover him. His aura was also completely restrained. Qinzong observed carefully. He approached the nearest dragon form and released a wisp of aura. That wisp of aura condensed and touched that dragon form like a thread. Fishing. Qinzong's condensed aura was like a fishing line. The dragon form sensed Qinzong's aura and immediately let out a roar. It directly rushed in the direction of Qinzong's aura. The huge body of 200 feet brought with it an astonishing pressure, as if a mountain flood had erupted. It was extremely shocking in an instant. However, Chunzong's expression did not change. He used his aura to guide that dragon form. As if he was fishing, he slowly lured that dragon form over. The other four had already retracted their breaths and were ready. They were waiting for Chunzong to lure Long Xiang over so that they could attack him with all their might. Naturally, Chunzong would take action as well. The five of them joined forces and killed Long Xiang in a 5-against-1 situation. Well done. One more time, Chunzong repeated the same trick and lured a dragon to kill him. His movements were getting more and more skillful. More than 30 dragon phantoms were attracted by Chunzong in this way and killed by the five of them. Although there was an accident in the process that attracted 2 dragon phantoms, the 5 of them still managed to kill it with their combined efforts. However, the difficulty was much higher. After killing it, they all heaved a sigh of relief. Keep up the good work. There are only 5 dragon images left. Long Xie's character was more impatient as he said hurriedly. If everyone wanted to take action, they could eliminate the 5 dragon avatars as well. However, it would be extremely difficult, and they might even alarm the gigantic dragon avatars. They had to kill all the dragon phantoms that were more than 200 feet in size. Only then would they be able to deal with the strongest dragon avatars in a 5-against-1 situation. Only then would they have the confidence to obtain the divine image origin. More than 30 dragon phantoms were killed, and the divine image essence that was obtained was naturally divided equally. Recover. One by one, they absorbed the divine image essence to recover their exhausted strength. After recovering their strength to the peak, they stepped into the cave and headed towards the divine image origin. When they got closer, everyone could see clearly. Truly, the figure behind the divine image origin. The gigantic figure was extremely shocking as it lay there, as if it was in a deep sleep. As it breathed in and out, a shocking aura was emitted. It was like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. It was extremely shocking. As it was lying there, the size of its body could not be seen clearly. However, judging from the thickness of its body, it was far greater than the dragon phantoms that were more than 200 feet in size. Just by lying there, it brought an indescribable shock to the 5 of them. Originally, when they saw the silhouette of the figure from afar, they were already surprised. Now, it was a kind of incomparable shock. It was like a giant beast from the abyss, causing them to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. At this moment, even Chunzong, who had an incomparably strong will, could not help but feel frightened. Don't disturb it. Get the divine image origin and leave immediately. Bufang's voice trembled slightly. That was excitement, but also an indescribable fear that even he did not notice. Oppression. The aura that the gigantic figure exuded was really too shocking and overbearing. That kind of oppression made people's hearts tremble. 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 They could not help it. No one objected to Bufang's suggestion. This giant beast was too terrifying. First, get the divine image origin. Brother Chun, I'll leave this matter to you, Bufang said again. Without a doubt, among the 5 of them, Chunzong was the most suitable candidate. This was because he was the best at concealing his aura, and his movement technique was also the most flexible. I'm not sure, Chunzong said seriously. Not sure. This also showed that the giant beast suppression was too strong. Shocking. The 5 of them even suspected that the giant beast was the kind of celestial image that had broken through the limit. Regardless of whether it was or not, since the 5 of them had come here, there was no reason to retreat. No matter what, they had to get the divine image origin. Taking a deep breath, Chunzong did his best to conceal his aura. His figure flashed and floated out like a gust of wind, silently approaching the divine image origin. He was close. When Chunzong was getting closer and closer to the divine image origin, he stretched out his hand to grab it. When his palm was only an inch away from the divine image origin, he could not grab it no matter how hard he tried. It was as if that inch was as far away as the end of the world. Chunzong's body could not help but tremble. This was because the air was filled with an extremely terrifying pressure. That pressure was almost condensed into a substance, crazily crashing like a violent giant wave. It was like a volcanic eruption, full of amazing power that could destroy everything. A pair of huge eyes filled with golden light that seemed to be burning, opened and stared at him. In those eyes, there was a kind of coldness, ruthlessness, and indifference. Its gaze seemed to carry an indescribably terrifying power that went straight to the depths of one's consciousness. Chunzong had a feeling that as long as he grabbed with his hand, it would lead to a destructive attack. The hand that he stretched out was slowly retracted, getting further and further away from the divine image origin. Bu Fong and the other three also felt that the pressure in the air had increased several times, making them shudder with fear. This huge figure seemed to be even more terrifying than they had imagined. Chunzong had already retracted half of his arm. Suddenly, without any warning, like a viper waiting for an opportunity to strike, he locked onto its prey in an instant and found the best opportunity. In an instant, he erupted with lightning speed and directly attacked, grabbing the divine image origin. The huge golden eyes that were staring at Chunzong were filled with calmness. As Chunzong's arm was pulled away, Jing's expression became calmer and calmer. But in an instant, she was directly enraged. Roar! A vigorous and violent roar suddenly sounded, like the roar of an ancient giant beast, carrying with it an extremely terrifying power that could destroy everything. That power directly blasted towards Chunzong, directly shattering the air into powder. Retreat! After grabbing the divine image origin, Chunzong did not hesitate to erupt with extreme speed, retreating in an instant. His speed was several times faster than before. The Nine Sky Extreme Escape Technique. This was the supreme secret technique of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, and Chunzong had already cultivated it to the 5th level. Under the burning of his own power, he could instantly erupt with 5 times his own speed. It was extremely fast. Chunzong rarely used the Nine Sky Extreme Escape Technique because it consumed too much power. But this time, he had no choice but to use it, otherwise, he would be directly killed by the giant beast's attack. Even though Chunzong had erupted with 5 times his speed, the giant beast attack was still extremely fast. It quickly caught up with Chunzong and was about to kill him. It was a dragon claw, an incomparably huge dragon claw. The dragon claw was like a small mountain, carrying with it an extremely terrifying power. Chunzong had no doubt that once he was hit, he would be directly killed. That gigantic dragon claw was already grabbing towards Chunzong, directly closing in. The terrifying aura caused Chunzong to involuntarily tremble. The pressure from the dragon claw was extremely terrifying. Hurry up and attack! Chunzong roared. Bufong and the other 3 reacted one after another. They did not hesitate to use their explosive secret techniques, instantly exploding with their strongest attacks towards the huge dragon claw. Boom, 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 boom. 4 extremely terrifying attacks bombarded the huge dragon claw that was burning with golden flames, but they were unable to shatter it. However, at least they were able to delay it for a moment, allowing Chunzong to escape from the dragon claw. Retreat. No matter what, Chunzong had to leave with the divine form origin. Stop him! Bufong roared, exploding with all his power. Jiangping did not say a word, but his entire body was emitting an extremely shocking chill. Kill! Long Xie's broadsword seemed to be burning, releasing an extremely terrifying power. Bai Chao's figure swept past in an arc. The arc was extremely cold and sharp, like a crescent moon piercing through the air. In the crescent moon, there seemed to be an osmanthus tree standing tall, using all his strength. At this time, he had to do this. He could not have the slightest hesitation, or else all his previous efforts would be wasted. Even if he had to sacrifice himself for this, he would not hesitate, because this was the only way he could hope to obtain the divine form origin. Retreat. Chunzong burned all his power and kept retreating. He did not want to fight with the huge beast at all. As for Bufong and the other 3, they used all their strength to block it, to buy time for Chunzong to escape. Seeing that Chunzong had retreated from the cave, the huge beast completely exploded. Its huge body, which was at least 500 feet tall, was completely revealed. The dragon claw, which was as huge as a small mountain, instantly pierced through the air, directly sending Bufong and the other three flying. Die. After receiving the attack of the huge dragon, Bufong and the other three could not take it anymore. Their divine form bodies collapsed and died. I hope you can bring the divine form origin out. Bufong and the others were all hoping before they died. Only then would their sacrifice be meaningful. If they could not bring it out this time, it would be difficult to come back again unless they expanded the team. However, expanding the team meant that the divine form origin would be distributed more and everyone would get less. If it was too little, even if they got it, it would be difficult to break through the limit. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, book guest residence. Chapter 2541. This time, I won't forget to update it again. The roar shook the earth and the mountains, and the aura was destructive. After the giant dragon form killed Bufong and the other three, its huge body rushed directly to the exit of the cave. That was where Chunzong had rushed out. The divine image origin also had great benefits for the celestial images. The dragon form could become a giant dragon form because it had been under the power of the divine image origin for a long time. The benefits were great, and it could not be taken away. Chunzong had taken away the divine image origin, which was equivalent to cutting off its future. How could it let go of such a huge grudge? Rumble. The huge body rushed into the cave and forced the cave open. The ground shook and the mountains shook. The whole cave seemed to be on the verge of collapsing, and cracks kept appearing. At the outermost entrance of the cave, a figure burning with pale, golden flames instantly fled into the distance like an aurora. Burn! Chunzong kept burning his strength, and he also kept refining the accumulated divine image essence to replenish the consumption of his burning strength. That was because the sense of danger was still there, and it was very strong. Just a few breaths after Chunzong rushed out of the cave shook violently, and the ground shook as if there was a big earthquake. In an instant, cracks spread out in all directions with the entrance of the cave as the center. Looking down from the sky, it looked like a huge spider web, covering a radius of hundreds of meters and spreading out at an alarming speed. Thousands of meters, tens of thousands of meters. In the next moment, the ground collapsed, and it was as if something had erupted from below, and it rushed up. Rumble. Amidst the violent shaking, a huge figure broke through the ground and rushed up into the sky. Its huge body was shining with golden light, as if it was burning. Its amazing power surged in the sky, and it looked as if the void around the huge figure was distorted. An extremely resounding roar immediately rang out, shaking the surroundings and shattering space itself. Immediately, the giant dragon avatar erupted with an incomparably shocking speed as it chased in the direction that Chunzong had left in. Although the body of the giant dragon form was huge, its speed was not slow at all. It was not slower than Chunzong, who was burning his strength, and it was even faster. Chunzong naturally heard the shocking roar. With a serious expression, he continued to burn his strength and rushed forward. Along the way, Chunzong also encountered the giant dragon form, but he did not dodge. He directly swung his sword to obtain the divine image essence and absorb it to replenish his strength. The pursuit of the giant dragon form was extremely crazy. It also alarmed the group of people who were hunting the weapon form in the Tomb of Weapons, and a few of them were disciples of the 7 Profound Sword sect. With such momentum, it must be a powerful dragon form. Let's go take a look. All of a sudden, the 90-foot godly forms began to move, heading toward the direction of the giant dragon form. Heavens, such a huge dragon form. Where did it? When they saw the giant dragon form, they were all shocked. The impact was indescribable. What a terrifying aura. Let's join hands and kill it. The divine image essence of such a huge dragon form might be very shocking. The benefits were tempting. Thinking that the extraordinary divine image essence might be able to help them break through their limits, they were all tempted. Attack. Little did they know that their actions had provided an invisible aid to Chunzong's escape. As soon as they attacked, they realized how wrong their choice was. If they had the chance to do it all over again, they would definitely not choose to attack. They would have retreated. No, after hearing the sound, they would not have even come to take a look. They would have stayed far away. However, there was no room for regret. Fortunately, the death here was not a real death. They would only lose a divine image essence. Abuse. It was a one-sided massacre. The giant dragon form was too terrifying. The attacks that fell on its huge body could not cause any damage at all. However, if they were hit, they would be killed directly. It was extremely terrifying. Because they had attacked, they had given Chunzong an opportunity to escape. He rushed out of the giant dragon form and quickly went back to the continent of the Nine Clouds. On the way, Chunzong had no choice but to stop using the 9 empty spaces escape technique. Luckily, the giant dragon form had been stopped for a while. There were over 100 strong cultivators in the continent of the Nine Clouds. Even if the giant dragon form attacked, they would still be able to resist. Of course, it was also possible that the continent of the Nine Clouds had been attacked. After all, the giant dragon form was too strong. After returning to the Nine Heavens Pavilion, Chunzong immediately left the mysterious world and returned to his body. The divine image source was naturally brought out by Chunzong as well. He must have taken the divine image essence out. Long Chia was extremely worried. He had been killed by the giant dragon form in the mysterious world, so he had no choice but to return to his body. He would not be able to enter the mysterious world again for a month. Therefore, he didn't know whether Chunzong had taken the divine image essence or not. Had the giant dragon form caught up with Chunzong and killed him? It was unknown. Everything was unknown. Because of the unknown, and because of the shocking value of the divine image essence, he was very nervous. He couldn't calm down at all. Long Chia was like that, and so were the other 3. They didn't know whether Chunzong had taken the divine image essence successfully. If he hadn't, it would be one thing. But what if he had? If Chunzong had really taken the divine image essence, what would he do? All of them couldn't help but ponder. If they put themselves in his shoes, if they obtained that ball of godly image quintessence, would they still take it out and distribute it according to the agreement from before? There was no answer because the divine image essence wasn't in their hands. They hadn't really faced that kind of situation, so all the assumptions were not valid. Then what about Chunzong? What would he do? Take the divine image essence, refine it, absorb it, and then tell them that he hadn't gotten it? This kind of situation existed. It was not surprising that benefits could move people's hearts. But now, they could only wait until they could enter the divine image secret land again. After all, they were quite far away from Heaven Continent where the Nine Heavens Imperial Court was located. It would take them several years to reach the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. The difference between a month and a few years was very obvious. A few days later, Chunzong entered the divine image secret land with the body refining divine image and saw a scene of devastation. The gathering place of the Nine Heavens seemed to have gone through a destructive disaster. Everywhere was in ruins. The surrounding walls had completely collapsed and shattered. The ground was cracked, and the pavilions were in ruins. Chunzong couldn't help but be dumbfounded. After being destroyed, it naturally had to be rebuilt. Taking materials from the ground and repairing it, Chunzong naturally joined in to help. At the same time, he inquired about the news and confirmed his guess. The giant dragon form. The giant dragon form was the cause of all this. It had followed Chunzong's aura directly to the gathering place of the Nine Heavens. It attacked the gathering place of the Nine Heavens and broke out in a great battle, almost destroying the gathering place of the Nine Heavens. However, the colossal dragon avatar was also beaten back. However, a large number of cultivators had died. Chunzong couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. No matter what, he couldn't let people know that the giant dragon form had attacked him. Otherwise, they would be furious. The most important thing was the source of the godly images. If people knew that he had obtained the source of the godly images, they wouldn't have an easy time. After a few days, the gathering place of the nine heavens was completely rebuilt. Chunzong went out to hunt godly images and obtain their essences. However, Chunzong didn't go to the dragon image abyss, nor did he go to the tomb of weapons. Instead, he went to Foggy Valley, where the mist image resided. The mist image was gray and white, and it looked like a ball of mist. It could change its shape at will. It could take the shape of a human or even a beast. Hunt. Chunzong kept hunting and absorbing the essence of the godly images. His godly image was becoming more and more condensed. Very quickly, the time was up. Chunzong went back to the Nine Heavens Pavilion and left the godly image secret world. Then, he used his chi-refining godly image to enter the godly image secret world and wait for Bu Fong and the others. Chunzong hadn't refined the source of the godly images yet. He hadn't refined a single bit of its strength. When the time was up, Bu Fong, Jiang Ping, Bai Chao, and Long Xie immediately entered the godly image secret world and appeared in the gathering place of the continent of the Nine Heavens. They had died in the dragon image abyss, and, after entering the godly image secret world, if they wanted to appear in the gathering place of the continent of the Nine Heavens, they would need to consume more godly images. But if they didn't do that, if they appear in the dragon image abyss, they would probably encounter the giant dragon form and die again. Brother Chun, did you get it? Bu Fong was not as calm as he usually was. His eyes were fixed on Chunzong, and the other three were the same, breathing heavily. I got it, said Chunzong. He didn't tease them. He just smiled and said, let's find a place to share it. All right. The four of them were startled at first, but then they were all extremely excited. The five of them found a secluded place, and Chunzong took out the godly image source. Bu Fong and the others stared at the godly image source, their faces filled with excitement. They're all here. Exactly the same. There's no loss, said Long Xie. After saying that, Long Xie suddenly felt that something was wrong. He hastily smiled and looked at Chunzong. Brother Chun, I'm not doubting you, I can understand, said Chunzong, smiling gently. According to the agreement, the godly image source had been divided into 10 equal parts. Bu Fong and Jiang Ping each had 2 parts, so there were 6 parts left. At that time, Chunzong could have taken 2 parts, but this time, after a unanimous agreement, Chunzong had taken 3 parts. The remaining 3 parts were divided equally between Bai Chao and Long Xie. Of course, Chunzong had gained the most. But then again, if Chunzong hadn't been so honest, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to get even a little bit. Now, they had at least gotten 1.5 parts. Brother Chun, if you have any problems in the future, just let me know, said Long Xie solemnly. I'm definitely going to be friends with you. Jiang Ping's tone was cold, but it contained an indescribable solemnity. I admire you. Bu Fong laughed loudly. Welcome to the Valley of Thousands of Medicine, said Bai Chao with a smile. If it had been them who had gotten the godly image source, would they have been as trustworthy as Chunzong? They didn't know, and they didn't dare to think about it. Because of this, they admired such a person very much. I just want peace of mind. Chunzong smiled slightly. If he went against the agreement and swallowed the godly image source, he would gain more, but he would lose more. It would go against his conscience and hurt his swordsmanship. First, he set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2542. The ball of God's origin was divided into 10 equal portions. Chunzong had 3 portions, and he was the one who gained the most out of the 5. With the 3 portions of God's origin, Chunzong left the divine image secret realm and returned to his body. In the Heartsword Palace on the Heavenly Heartsword Peak, the 6th level of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, Chunzong took out the God's origin. He was slightly excited as he felt the aura contained within it. The aura was extremely pure and had an indescribable magnificence. It was as unpredictable as the ocean. Chunzong absorbed a portion of the God's origin to see if he could break through the limit. In an instant, Chunzong activated his 90-foot primordial spirit Dharma idol. As his power circulated, the god's origin seemed to turn into a stream of water and flowed directly into the primordial spirit Dharma idol, causing it to emit a faint white light. After refining it, Chunzong immediately felt an extremely vigorous power spread out from within his body, sweeping out in all directions. It was like the water of a great river surging endlessly, vast and mighty, as if it could destroy everything. Expand. Chunzong felt that his primordial spirit Dharma idol was constantly expanding, as if it was going to burst. In an instant, the white light on the primordial spirit Dharma idol was like a burning flame, swaying with the wind. The 90-foot primordial spirit Dharma idol was also growing bit by bit. 91 feet, 92 feet, 93 feet. The size of the primordial spirit Dharma idol was constantly growing. Chunzong could clearly feel that the power that filled it was also increasing and becoming more powerful. Previously, when he was improving in the divine image secret realm, it was constantly accumulating power, causing the god's origin to become more solid. Now, it was about to break through the limit, the shackle from 90 foot to 10 feet. As the god's origin was continuously refined and absorbed by Chunzong, the primordial spirit Dharma idol was also constantly growing. At 94 feet, the flames burning on the primordial spirit Dharma idol seemed to be even more intense. As the god's origin was continuously refined and absorbed, Chunzong's primordial spirit Dharma idol also increased to 99 feet, reaching the limit. Power. An extremely powerful power surged within the 99 feet primordial spirit Dharma idol. The burning white flames seemed to be able to burn the surrounding void, causing a distortion. Strong. Chunzong felt that the power of his primordial spirit Dharma form could shatter the heavens with a single blow. Of course, this was just an illusion. His strength had not truly reached that level. Burn. When the Dharma form of the primordial spirit reached 99 feet, its growth rate became very, very slow. As the flames burned, it grew bit by bit until it reached 99 feet. 99 zhong. It was only a fraction away from 10 zhong. However, this split was like a heavenly moat that firmly blocked his path. It was difficult to break through. Burn. The white flames on the primordial spirit Dharma form burned even more fiercely. That was the final eruption of the god form's origin. Charge. He wanted to use his overwhelming power to break through that layer of shackles, shatter it, and truly make a breakthrough. Chunzong kept accumulating his strength, and the flames burned more and more fiercely. When all the power had been completely ignited, Chunzong guided this extremely tyrannical power to once again attack that layer of shackles. Boom, boom, boom. It was like a huge door that was closed. A torrent-like power was surging endlessly. It was like a flaming magma that carried an extremely tyrannical power. If the first time did not work, then he would try again. Again and again. This time, the closed door began to shake. The rumbling sound became louder and louder, more and more intense. It was extremely shocking. The final charge. The door was blasted open. In an instant, it was as if endless power was surging from within. In an instant, it was as if something had been shattered. The primordial spirit Dharma form grew again. One fraction. It had only grown by one fraction, but it seemed to have exhausted all of its strength. A completely different feeling suddenly filled the air. That feeling was as if it had broken free from some kind of shackle in an instant. It was as if it had removed a heavy burden from its body. It felt light all over, as if it could float. It was extremely comfortable. But immediately, Chunzong felt a heavy pressure, as if it had been born out of thin air, oppressing him from all directions. A turbid and heavy feeling pervaded the air, causing the primordial spirit Dharma form to feel more and more sticky. Chunzong did not withdraw his primordial spirit Dharma form. Instead, he continued to keep his primordial spirit Dharma form to adapt. Chunzong also knew why this was happening. The relaxed feeling was brought about by the breakthrough. After the breakthrough, the primordial spirit Dharma form had become stronger and its perception of the surroundings had become clearer. But at the same time, the pressure from the outside world had also increased. It was as if the bigger the body, the wider the contact area. Not long after, Chunzong adapted. The heavy and turbid feeling seemed to have disappeared. But in reality, it did not disappear. Chunzong had adapted. When the primordial spirit Dharma form returned to its body, Chunzong could feel the power contained in it. It was much stronger than the body of the divine spirit Dharma form. It was a difference in quantity and quality. Chunzong took a deep breath, calmed himself down, and said to himself, "Next, I'll break the shackles of the divine spirit Dharma form and raise it to the level of the dawn realm." Although the divine spirit Dharma form had not been raised to the extreme, there were still two divine spirit origins. He could definitely break the limit and break through to the dawn realm of 100 feet. As long as the divine spirit Dharma form reached 100 feet, and both chi cultivation and body cultivation broke through to the dawn realm, his strength would increase tremendously. In an instant, Chunzong activated the power, and his body rapidly expanded into a body of 90 feet. It was full of power. Immediately, Chunzong absorbed the first divine spirit origin and began to refine it. The powerful and vigorous power surged out of it and filled the body of the 90 feet divine spirit Dharma form. It circulated endlessly, and the body of the divine spirit Dharma form continued to improve. Not long after, the body of the divine spirit Dharma form reached the extreme. It was more than 100 times, or even 1,000 times, more efficient than refining and absorbing the divine spirit Dharma form. It was extremely shocking. In the next moment, the body of the divine spirit Dharma form that had been condensed to the extreme began to grow bit by bit. It reached 91 feet, 92 feet, 93 feet. As the body of the divine spirit Dharma form continued to grow, the power contained in it also became stronger. The feeling of the power expanding made Chunzong feel like he was going to explode. It was as if he could destroy everything. 99 feet. When the body of the divine spirit Dharma form reached 99 feet, the divine spirit origin was completely consumed. Fortunately, Chunzong had obtained 3 divine spirit origins. Now, there was only one left. He absorbed it again and began to refine it. He believed that after refining this divine spirit origin, he would be able to break through the limit and raise the body of the divine spirit Dharma form to a higher level. 99 feet, 99 feet, 99 feet. It increased bit by bit, getting closer and closer to the limit. 99 feet. Just like before, Chunzong continued to accumulate power. The black flame continued to burn on his body. The black flame had a kind of arrogance, dominance, and vigor. Go, go, go. Again and again, Chunzong felt that at that moment, it was as if something had been shattered. Power, a new power, kept pouring into the body of the divine spirit Dharma form, causing it to break through the final limit. Break, break through, break through. With one step, the body of the divine spirit Dharma form increased from 99 feet to 100 feet. That one step was like the difference between heaven and earth. With one step, it was the difference between the normal state and the extreme state. It was unknown how many people were stopped by that one step. 100 feet of divine spirit Dharma form. Chunzong activated another 100 feet of divine spirit Dharma form. The divine spirit Dharma form appeared after the divine spirit Dharma form, like a shadow. An extremely tyrannical power flowed endlessly between the two divine manifestations, giving Chunzong a feeling that he could shatter everything with a single strike. What a strong power! Chunzong thought to himself. This kind of power was simply overwhelming for him before he broke through. It was completely overwhelming. He believed that if he used the AO Wu of the extreme state with the divine spirit Dharma form, the power would be even more terrifying. Next, I will raise the other AO Wu to the extreme state level, Chunzong thought to himself. The breakthrough of the divine spirit Dharma form did not only increase his strength, but also increased Chunzong's cultivation level. The efficiency of comprehending AO Wu had also increased. The 5 AO Wu were Heavenly Wind Slash, Wind Blast, Traceless Wind, and Lightning Flash. They were all level 9 AO Wu. A Night Listening to the Wind and Rain was a level 10 AO Wu. Qinzong wanted to raise the other level 9 AO Wu to level 10. He wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Time passed slowly. Qinzong was not in a hurry to enter the Divine Spirit Dharma's secret realm. Instead, he went into seclusion in the Heart Sword Palace to comprehend and improve. This stage was undoubtedly the best time to lay down his foundation. It was very important. A good foundation would be of great help to his future improvement. If he did not develop it to the extreme, he would not be able to start again if he missed the opportunity. Meditating, comprehending, and practicing. The combination of movement and stillness allowed Qinzong to deepen his understanding of the mysteries of the AO Wu. The sword light broke through the air in an instant. It was as fast as lightning, but it also contained an indescribable agility. It was the lightning flash, but it also seemed like it was not. It was Qinzong combining the mysteries of the wind blast with the wind blast to form this move. It's not perfect yet, Qinzong thought to himself. He continued practicing. Extreme wind break and graceful lightning were both profound martial arts that focused on speed. However, in addition to speed, graceful lightning also had the flexibility of a flying swan. On the other hand, in addition to speed, extreme wind break also had a sharpness that could pierce through everything. What Qinzong wanted to do now was to take the essence of the wind blast and lightning flash and combine them to form a new move that was even more powerful. He tried again and again, and failed again and again. He learned from each failure, and the next time, he would reduce his mistakes and improve it. Finally, Qinzong focused his mind. His eyes were extremely focused, as if he could see through everything. His aura was completely restrained. But in the next moment, Qinzong burst out. He did not move, but his momentum burst out in an instant. It seemed to condense into one. The long sword at his waist was also unsheathed in an instant. It turned into a dazzling, deep cyan sword light that broke through the air. The dark cyan sword light was not straight. Instead, it was like a curved lightning bolt. However, its speed was extremely fast as it meandered through the void at an astonishing speed. Its front end was like an arrow or the tip of a sword. It was incomparably sharp and seemed to be able to pierce through everything in the world. However, the sword light was not straightforward. Instead, it was constantly swaying, making it difficult to determine where it would ultimately stab, making it even harder to guard against. Chapter 2543. When Qinzong came out of seclusion, he had already successfully upgraded several level 9 AO Wu to the level 10 level. His original level 10 AO Wu, A Night's Wind and Rain, had also been upgraded to the top level 10 level. Following that, his world Dao had also broken through and condensed the 10th divine inscription. A 10-foot divine image, 10 great path divine inscriptions, and a level 10 AO Wu. The Dawn Realm. Qinzong's strength had completely stepped into the Dawn Realm. Compared to before, he was much stronger. Qinzong planned to issue another challenge. With his current strength, he might be able to reach the top 20. The top 20 of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's Heavenly General Leaderboard were, at least at the Dawn Realm. However, there were differences in strength among the Dawn Realm. While Qinzong was still thinking about who to challenge, he heard a piece of news and was immediately shocked. Qi has already rushed into the top 10 and is ranked 9th. If the top 20 of the Heavenly General Leaderboard had the strength of the Dawn Realm, then the top 10 had at least the strength of the Dawn Realm. In other words, Qi's strength had already risen to the level of the Dawn Realm. Thinking about it, Qinzong had an indescribable feeling. It seemed to be an invisible pressure. Too fast. The speed of Huey's improvement was too fast, so fast that it was shocking. That innate Yuan King body was indeed shocking. While Qinzong was amazed by Qi's amazing talent, he did not know that others were also shocked by Qinzong's talent. A mere human from the third sequence void had improved so quickly. It was too shocking. If he had been born in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, it might have been even more shocking. However, there were many things that did not have ifs. However, Chunzong's performance was indeed very shocking. Chunzong was not clear about the strength of the top 20 of the Heavenly General Leaderboard. In the end, he challenged the 20th fight. The 20th had been at the Dawn Realm for decades. He was very talented, and his strength was also very terrifying. However, in the end, Chunzong defeated him by alternating between the Heart Sword technique and the World Sword technique. However, it was not an easy victory. After winning, Chunzong was ranked 20th on the Heavenly Generals list. At this point, there were as many as 22 disciples who had broken through their limits and reached the supreme state in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Because there were only 20 before, there was one more after the rise of the Tian Ho. Now, there was another Chunzong. Good. This kid is indeed extremely shocking. Alliance Master, you praise me highly. You have great foresight. Within the Tao Alliance, the Paragons were all extremely excited and happy. Ever since Mo Wui 10,000 years ago, no one in the Tao Alliance had been able to make it into the top 20. Of course, this didn't mean that no one in the Tao Alliance could break through the limit and enter the Lamita realm. In fact, there were quite a few people who could do so, but if the Tao Alliance's Tao disciples could do so, then so could the other disciples. This was especially true for the Origin race, who had an easier time. Therefore, while you're improving, others are also improving. When one broke through the limit and stepped into the low extremity realm, there might have been many others who had broken through the limit and stepped into the low extremity realm before them. It was very possible that not only did one's ranking not rise, but might even fall. Generation after generation of disciples, when their potential was almost exhausted, they would either forcefully break through to the fourth realm or leave their status as disciples to become deacons, etc. This was because the Heavenly Generals listed disciples. Therefore, even if there were deacons who had broken through the limit and possessed extraordinary strength, they still wouldn't be able to make it into the Heavenly Generals list. Another point was that in this generation, such as Green Nightmare, Sui Han, Deng Xing, Bladeless, etc., were all extraordinarily talented. It was almost certain that they would break through the limit. The only thing they lacked was some time. When they broke through the limit and entered the Lamita realm, there would be a few more disciples who had broken through the limit on the Heavenly Generals list. Of course, these weren't the only Origin race prodigies who could break through the limit. There were also other top prodigies from other races, etc. According to Chunzong's knowledge, at the peak of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, even in the same batch, there were hundreds of disciples who had broken through the limit and entered the Lamita realm. If the deacons were included, there would be even more. Now, it was just the beginning. Of course, the sooner one broke through the limit and entered the Lamita realm, the better. Chunzong was in 20th place, and the rewards he received increased yet again. For example, cultivation time in the 9 divine temples, Mount Prudential, and even cultivation time in the refinement Tao world were all given. Just as Chunzong was about to enter the divine aspect secret realm again, someone came to visit him. It was Green Nightmare, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Congratulations on breaking through the limit, Green Nightmare said to Chunzong. As a top prodigy of the Origin race, he hadn't broken through the limit yet. He didn't know when he would be able to do so. You didn't come to me to talk about this, right? Chunzong replied with a smile. This is just in passing. Green Nightmare smiled faintly. He continued, in half a month, Senior Brother Yuan Jin will challenge Swordsman Dragon. It's a rare opportunity. Do you want to come and watch? Senior Brother Yuan Jin is going to challenge Swordsman Dragon. Chunzong was shocked. The news had probably just spread. He hadn't heard about it yet. That's right. Senior Brother Yuan Jin heard that Swordsman Dragon was coming to Sky Continent, so he issued a challenge. Swordsman Dragon has accepted the challenge, Green Nightmare said seriously. Who is Swordsman Dragon? Swordsman Dragon was an elite on the Divine General ranking list. There were 9,999 people on the Divine General's ranking, and Swordmaster Zhulong was ranked 9,813th. He was at the bottom of the list, But even so, he was still terrifyingly powerful. The divine general ranking list was open to all third realms in the entire universe. It didn't care about forces. Simply put, any elite on the divine general ranking list had the power of a transcendent realm. However, having the power of a transcendent realm didn't necessarily mean one could be on the divine general ranking list. Currently, there were only 5 people on the divine general ranking list in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. They were the top 5 elites on the divine general ranking list. Moreover, among the 5 experts from the Nine Heavens Imperial Court who were listed on the divine general's roll, the highest ranking was also in the top 8,000. As for that senior brother Yuan Jin, he was one of the original members and a disciple from the previous batch of Nine Heavens Imperial Court disciples. Currently, he was ranked 6th on the divine general's roll. Without a doubt, Yuan Jin had broken through to the transcendent realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have issued a challenge. All right, let's go together. Chun Zong agreed without hesitation. Challenging the divine general ranking list was a battle between transcendent realm elites. It was a rare opportunity. They definitely couldn't miss it. The location of the battle has been chosen. Let's go now and get a good spot, Green Nightmare said directly. All right, Chun Zong couldn't wait. Although there was still half a month before the battle, there would definitely be many people going to watch the battle. If they were late, they might not be able to get a good spot. All right, the location would allow them to see the battle more clearly. There was no need to prepare anything. The two immediately headed to the Realm Gate Mountain. They then teleported through the Realm Gate of the Realm Gate Mountain and arrived at the island closest to the location of the battle. The location of the battle was a sparsely populated island. There weren't many resources either. Hence, the Nine Heavens Imperial Court didn't set up a Realm Gate there as they weren't willing to waste resources on it. Even during normal days, very few people would come to this island. But this time, as the news of the battle between the 6th-ranked expert on the Divine General Ranking list and the Divine General Ranking list's absolute dragon swordsman spread out, many people brought their flying ships over. They specialized in transporting people between the 2 islands to earn Cosmos God Crystals. It was considered a good business. A battle between experts on the Divine General Ranking list is not to be missed. Just 100 Cosmos God Crystals, and you can see an exciting battle. Many flying ships stopped at the dock. Shouts could be heard continuously. A ticket of 100 Cosmos God Crystals was indeed very expensive. It was frighteningly expensive. But considering that they could personally witness the battle between experts on the Divine General Ranking list, many people still gritted their teeth and took out their savings. To Chun Zong and Green Nightmare, 100 Cosmos God Crystals was nothing. The two of them didn't hesitate at all. They directly bought the tickets and boarded the flying ship, waiting for it to depart. When the airship was almost full, it immediately started flying towards the island where the final battle was to be held. One after another, the sky-crossing airships moved forward one after another. The scene was quite spectacular. Even with the speed of these flying ships, it would still take a few days to cross between the 2 islands. Hence, it was necessary to come over in advance. A few days later, the flying ship finally arrived. Many people came down from the ship. Almost all of them were cultivators at the 3rd level of the Divine Image Realm. They came from various groups in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court and even Heaven Continent. Some of them were even independent cultivators or cultivators from other continents. They just happened to have this opportunity. Of course, they didn't want to miss it. The location of the battle between Brother Yuan Jin and Sword-Dueling Dragon is in the valley in the center of the island, Green Nightmare said as he and Chun Zong moved quickly towards the center of the island. Let's go quickly. We have to get a good spot. Everyone understood the importance of a good spot. They all moved quickly. That way, the difference in cultivation level and speed was obvious. Some people directly fell behind. They could only see the other people's backs rapidly moving away. They couldn't do anything. Chun Zong was ranked 20th on the Divine General Ranking list. He was very fast. Although Green Nightmare wasn't as strong as Chun Zong, he had the innate spiritual body of wind. He was extremely fast. Therefore, the two of them moved at an astonishing speed, one in front of the other. They were ahead of many people. This was a small island. It wasn't very big. Before long, Chunzong, Green Nightmare, and the others arrived at the valley in the center. They directly rushed to the edge of the valley. Inside was the sunken valley. There were rocks all around the valley. There were also many plants. The rocks were high and low, and the plants flourished. At the edge of the valley, there were places where they could see the valley clearly. They were clearly very good spots. However, there were also places where they were blocked by rocks or trees. The spots weren't good. Chunzong and Green Nightmare glanced around quickly. They immediately found a very good spot. With a wave of their hands, they took out cushions and small tables. They also took out some wine and food. After all, there were still many days before the battle. They couldn't just wait here empty-handed. Chapter 2544. Many figures appeared at the edge of the valley. In the distance, waves of figures were rapidly approaching. Chunzong and Green Nightmare were drinking wine while exchanging their cultivation experiences. The path of cultivation was never about cultivating in seclusion. Going out to temper oneself was about using the outside world to improve oneself. Tempering was just a general term. If it was truly divided, there were many types. Discussing and exchanging cultivation experiences with other cultivators was one of them. Verifying with each other, learning from each other's strengths to make up for one's weaknesses, absorbing the essence to improve oneself. A rumble suddenly sounded. Not far away, there were people fighting fiercely. That place was reached first. One side of the battle angrily said, "It's mine since I've taken a fancy to it." The other side sneered. Both sides were evenly matched. They fought fiercely without stopping. Chi overflowed and shattered the mountain rocks. "Get lost!" A thunderous voice rang out, shaking the area and shattering the heavens and earth. In an instant, a terrifying force erupted and swept out like the roar of the sea, like a torrent bursting through a dam. The power that erupted in an instant was terrifying to the extreme. It swept out in all directions and covered both sides of the fierce battle. Attacks were shattered one after another. Many figures were sent flying while vomiting blood. They were like gourds rolling on the ground. This was because the chi from the fierce battle had affected others, provoking them and causing them to be retaliated. Position. Snatching position. A good position would allow one to observe the situation in the valley from all directions without any cover. It was beneficial for spectating the battle. A bad position would naturally be covered and hard to see clearly. Now, there were some latecomers who took a fancy to the positions of those who came before them and tried to snatch them, triggering a battle. However, Chunzong and Green Nightmare did not care. It was fine as long as they were not affected. This position is not bad. I'll pay 500 Cosmos God Crystals for you two to find another position. Just as Chunzong and Green Nightmare were watching the show, 2 males and 1 female walked over and stood before Chunzong and Green Nightmare. The leader was waving a fan lightly. He looked down at them from above. His tone was casual, but contained an indescribable tyranny. Before Chunzong could respond, Green Nightmare spoke first with a cold expression, "Get lost. Do not know what's good for you. If you don't leave now, not only will you not be able to get a single piece of Cosmos God Crystal, you will also end up in a miserable state." Another male angrily pointed at Green Nightmare as his saliva splattered. "I'm in a good mood today, so I don't want to fight." The young man with the fan smiled and said, "It's best if the two of you know what's good for you. You'd better leave quickly. Otherwise, if you really anger Senior Brother Su Ming, you'll suffer." The woman held the young man's arm with one hand and waved her hand at Chunzong and Ching Fu as if she was driving them away. Her tone was disdainful. "If you don't scram, you'll leave your life behind." Green Nightmare's expression grew colder. "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." The male beside the young man with the fan became even more furious. He directly attacked with a punch that carried a terrifying force. It was like a volcanic eruption, exploding with a shockwave that was blazing hot. That punch seemed to shatter the air and turned into a flame-like shockwave. Green Nightmare's eyes narrowed as a cold light shot out. In a split second, he pointed out with a finger. A green energy condensed at the tip of that finger and shot out directly. Shenzong did not act. Instead, he seemed to be watching the show because he could sense that the threat brought by these three was not strong. They were not even as strong as Green Nightmare. The man's expression suddenly changed, and the young man with the fan was also shocked. He immediately made his move, and the fan in his hand was instantly filled with a deep green energy. He suddenly waved his fan, and the fan in his hand was suddenly filled with a deep green energy. He suddenly waved his fan. With a fan, a terrifying force swept out instantly, causing a series of explosions to resound. The energy was like a whirlwind that blasted towards the finger of Green Nightmare, canceling each other out. Isn't your action too ruthless? The young man with the fan stared at Green Nightmare with rage. So what? Green Nightmare's expression was cold as he attacked again. His powerful finger energy tore through the air. You're courting death. The young man with the fan was furious. His killing intent exploded as he attacked again. A terrifying storm swept up with his fan. One had to admit that the young man with the fan was quite strong. He had the strength to be ranked on the Sky General ranking. After all, Green Nightmare was ranked in the 300s on the Sky General ranking. The fact that this person could fight him head-on showed that he was quite strong. However, he was still no match for Green Nightmare. Under Green Nightmare's rapidly changing finger techniques, the young man with the fan was defeated and spat out a mouthful of blood. The young man with the fan was very decisive. He was no match for Green Nightmare, so he immediately retreated, not giving Green Nightmare a chance to attack again. Of course, this was also because Green Nightmare had no intention of chasing him. Otherwise, he could have killed him. Nice finger technique, Chunzong said to Green Nightmare with a smile. It's still not as good as your sword technique. Green Nightmare smiled faintly. He did not seem as murderous as before. I think there will be more trouble later, Chunzong said meaningfully. If you come again, I won't be merciful, Green Nightmare said coldly. This was Heaven Continent, the territory of the Nine Heaven Imperial Court. He was a true disciple of the Nine Heaven Imperial Court and an expert on the Sky General ranking. How could he be afraid? If trouble did not come, then he should be prepared to be crushed. No matter if it was Qing Nightmare or Chunzong, they didn't take the potential trouble to heart. In other words, they didn't take it seriously. Firstly, this was Heaven Continent where the Nine Heavens Imperial Court was located. Secondly, both of them were powerful, especially Chunzong. He had just broken through to the low extremity realm not long ago and was eager to fight with a strong opponent. The battle between Yuan Jin and the Dragon Swordsman was a battle between third realms. Those who came to watch were also third realms. Fourth realms were not very interested because it had nothing to do with them. Even if they watched, it would be like watching a junior. It would be difficult for them to gain any enlightenment. As expected, Chunzong's words came true soon. The young man with the fan from before came again. This time, there was someone else with him. It was a young man in a long golden robe. He had a dignified appearance, and traces of a faintly discernible aura surrounded him. The aura was shockingly resilient. His eyes were extremely bright, flickering with the light of the sun. He walked over with large strides with his hand behind his back. His originally faintly discernible aura also continuously strengthened, becoming more and more shocking. It transformed into surging, blazing waves that charged and pressured over. Green Nightmare's eyes immediately shot out a shocking cold light. Green chi burst out of his body in an instant, sweeping around him to resist the other's aura. However, the green chi was like a candle in the wind, about to be crushed at any time. Green Nightmare's expression was very grave. Leave this person to me. Chunzong's voice entered Green Nightmare's ears. Immediately, Green Nightmare felt the strong pressure on him decrease rapidly and then disappear. This was because Chunzong had released his own aura to resist the other. Chunzong felt a strong pressure from the other's body. This meant that this person's ability was extraordinary. He might be a low extremity expert who had broken through the limit. Green Nightmare was not a match for such an expert. The aura soared into the sky. as if it had turned into a faint golden flame that was burning. It emitted a shocking power that was indescribable. It was lofty and slightly domineering, as dazzling as the sun in the sky. The other aura was extremely sharp, like a heavenly sword hanging in the sky. It emitted a sharp light that sent chills down people's spines. Ling Yi of the Haoyang sect. Who are you? The man in a long golden robe, whose aura was like the sun, suddenly said loudly. His voice was vast and mighty. It seemed faint, but it contained an indescribable power that spread in all directions. The commotion had already alerted the people around, and they all looked over. When they heard the name Haoyang sect, they were all shocked. Haoyang sect was one of the 9 overlord forces in the 9th heaven universe. It was the overlord of another continent. The name Ling, he was also extraordinary. He was one of the most powerful disciples of Haoyang sect and had a shocking reputation. Chunzong of the 9 heavens imperial court, Chunzong replied calmly. A disciple of the 9 heavens imperial court. He's Chunzong. Suddenly, there were exclamations of surprise. After all, what had happened in the Divine Aspect Secret Realm wasn't limited to the Divine Aspect Secret Realm. It had already been spread all over Heaven's continent and even to the other 8 continents. He had single-handedly killed 37 disciples of the 7 profound sword sect, and one of them was the famous Hao Ming. Because of this incident, Chunzong's name had spread throughout the 9th heaven universe. Although some time had passed and the popularity had died down, the name Chunzong was still remembered by many people. Of course, they had only heard of his name, but had never seen him in person. Today, they finally saw him in person. Ling Yi, Chunzong. One was a disciple of the Haoyang sect, and the other was a disciple of the 9 heavens imperial court. They were both overlord forces in the 9th heaven universe, and they were both famous top geniuses. It said that Chunzong is not from the origin tribe, but the human clan. He's from the 3rd sequence void, not from the universe. What? He's from the 3rd sequence void? How can he be so powerful? This must be fake news from the 9 heavens imperial court. I don't believe that a human clan from the 3rd sequence void can be so powerful. Chunzong from the 9 heavens imperial court? Let's see what you're capable of. Ling Yi sneered, and the aura on his body became more intense. Terrifying heat spread out, and the light shone in all directions, making it difficult for people to look at him directly. What a terrifying aura. He's indeed a top genius from the Haoyang sect. His aura is too strong. At the same time, Chunzong's sword essence exploded, becoming more tyrannical and sharp, as if it could tear everything apart. The eyelids of the surrounding people twitched, and they felt as if they were about to be torn apart by an invisible sword. It was extremely uncomfortable. Retreat. The crowd involuntarily retreated further away to avoid being affected by the battle. Once such experts fought, the aftermath would undoubtedly be terrifying. If they were unlucky enough to be affected, getting injured would be a small matter. If they were unlucky, they might even die. That would be too unjust. Since ancient times, there have been many cases of people dying from the aftermath of the battle because they were too close to the battle. The primordial spirit Dharma power appeared in an instant. It was a blazing sun, and it was at least 10 feet tall. Ling Yi slowly raised his right arm, and his 5 fingers opened, releasing a strong aura as if they were burning with golden flames. Then he turned his wrist, and his 5 fingers clenched into a fist. He retracted his arm and punched out. First, set a small target. For example, 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2545. Burn. That punch was like a burning fireball. It was as if the sun was falling, shaking the void and destroying everything. It was as if it was going to smash and burn everything into ashes. The heat spread, and the air became distorted. It was as if there was an inexplicable devouring force that sucked in all the aura in the surroundings. The aura was constantly condensed and poured into that punch, causing the light of that punch to become even more dazzling. Its power also seemed to become more and more shocking. In the end, The punch made Chunzong feel a sense of danger. At that moment, Chunzong's primordial spirit Dharma power also appeared. It was 100 feet tall. At the same time, his body-refining Dharma power was also activated. It was also 100 feet tall. Once the members of the Origin clan started to cultivate, their cultivation strength would be much higher than that of the human clan. This was their racial advantage. Therefore, the human clan had no advantage when it came to primordial spirit Dharma power. They were completely at a disadvantage. Even Chunzong could not change this fact. Therefore, if he wanted to compete with his opponent in terms of basic strength, he had to activate both the Qi-refining Dharma power and the body-refining Dharma power at the same time. Primordial spirit Dharma power and the body-refining Dharma power. This human clan cultivates both Qi and body-refining. No wonder he has such a reputation. He cultivates both Qi and body-refining. Well, lucky guy. Cultivating both Qi and body-refining at the same time was very difficult. Very few people could do it, even with the talents of the Origin clan. Cultivating both Qi and body-refining was not something that could be achieved by racial talent. It had nothing to do with race. Everyone suddenly realized that this person's strength was closely related to his mastery of both Qi and body-refining Dharma power. Facing the attack that was like a burning sun, Chunzong did not have any intention of dodging. He unsheathed his sword and suddenly slashed out. The dark green sword essence carried an unparalleled dominance and brutality. It was like a strong gust of wind. 10th Order Aowu. Hegemonic Wind Slash. This sword originated from the Hegemonic Wind Slash. It stood out and was even more domineering and violent than the Hegemonic Wind Slash. It was extremely mysterious. That sword was incomparably overbearing and violent to the extreme. Just a glance at it would cause one to feel a sense of oppression and involuntarily shudder with fear. It was as if one's entire body would be sliced apart, and directly turned into powder under this sword. Terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions as they collided. It was as if the heavens and earth were falling apart. Green Nightmare and the others had already retreated far away. They didn't dare to get close because the shockwaves from the collision were too terrifying. Mountains crumbled and the earth cracked. Lingyi's expression was solemn. He did not expect the other party to be so strong. His reputation was not undeserved. Take another blow from me, Ling Yi suddenly shouted, and the primordial spirit Dharma power above him suddenly shook, as if it was burning fiercely, releasing an even more shocking light and heat. An extremely tyrannical power suddenly emerged from it, surging into Ling Yi's right arm, and finally converging in his fist, directly bursting out with an extremely intense light. Boom! This attack was much stronger than the previous one. Chunzong struck out with his sword again. This time, it was still the mighty blow of divine wind, but with the use of the ninefold mixed killing technique, its power was much stronger than before. An even more tyrannical shockwave burst forth once again, causing an even more shocking impact than before. It was earth-shattering. Take another blow from me. Chunzong did not retreat. A divine light flashed through his eyes. Immediately, he stabbed out with his sword. The sword light of that sword was blue and deep, with a hint of lightness and faintness. The sword light suddenly became illusory, and in an instant, a blurry look appeared in the eyes of many people. They were unknowingly affected and brought into a strange state. It was as if everything around them had disappeared, and only darkness descended, enveloping all directions. It was as if they had directly appeared on a long street. Under the dark night, the street was brightly lit, but there was an indescribable, deathly stillness. Immediately, the lights of the houses seemed to have disappeared, and only a small building appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the next moment, everyone felt as if the world was spinning, and unknowingly, they appeared in that small building. There was no light or fire in the small building, and it was pitch black. Outside the small building, they could vaguely see lights that seemed to sparkle like stars. The night breeze was cool, and there was a light drizzle. Wisps of coldness drifted in from outside the window, causing everyone to subconsciously tighten their robes, as if only by doing so could they bring a trace of warmth. An indescribable sense of loneliness grew in their hearts and quietly spread. What an astonishing divine decree attack! In the distance, a middle-aged man's eyes flashed brightly, and he instantly broke away from the divine decree attack. He came to his senses and secretly marveled, as expected of the top heaven's pride of the nine heavens' imperial court. He is indeed extraordinary. The old man beside the middle-aged man chuckled. Although the two of them did not look young, they were both third realm practitioners and itinerant practitioners. Among the itinerant practitioners, they were rather famous because they were both final realm experts. Although they were both final realm experts, they were nothing compared to surpassing realm experts. It was precisely because of this that they had specially rushed over to watch the battle between Yuan Jin and the Dragon Swordsman. That was a battle between surpassing realm experts. Not to mention that the Dragon Swordsman was one of the more powerful surpassing realm experts. What they did not expect was that they would encounter such a powerful divine decree attack. Even with their final realm abilities, they were still somewhat affected and almost fell into the attack. If even they were affected, it was even more so for those who had not stepped into the final realm. The impact was even more intense. This sword, listening to the wind and rain in the small building, was even more powerful when Chunzong broke through to the low realm. Moreover, because it had been deduced and raised to the level of the top 10th level AO Wu, it was even more astonishing. A blurred color first appeared in Ling Yi's eyes, and then they immediately regained clarity. Then, blurriness appeared again, intertwining between the blurriness and clarity, and a hint of struggle could be seen. The sword light arrived. The strongest power of this sword was an attack of divine decree, and its direct lethality was weaker. However, even if it was weaker, it was enough to threaten Ling Yi. In an instant, Ling Yi's protective power was hit, breaking through layer by layer. Ling Yi was completely awakened by this and quickly retreated. However, he was still a little too late. His protective power was immediately broken through, and he was directly hit by the sword. Blood splattered everywhere. Fortunately, the power of this sword was an attack of divine decree, and its direct lethality was not very strong. Therefore, his injury was not very serious. However, Ling Yi also understood that unless he could block the attack of divine decree, it would be difficult for him to defeat his opponent. In just an instant, Ling Yi turned into a stream of golden flames and quickly escaped. He did not linger in the battle. This decisiveness made people speechless. In the world of cultivators, who could live longer? Those who did not linger in the battle and retreated were one of them. Although Qinzong was confident that he could catch up with Ling Yi by using 9 Void Extreme Escape technique, he did not do so. They were just competing for personal feelings and were not mortal enemies. Such swordsmanship and such strength should have intimidated others. He believed that no one would come to fight for a spot in the future. After all, this was not the only good spot. There were many others. Brother Chun, your strength. After witnessing Chun Zong's attack with his own eyes and feeling the power of his swordsmanship, Qing Yan's expression was rather complicated. Back in the day, Chun Zonka was no match for him. He had been defeated by him at the Disciple Assembly. But then, Chun Zonka grew rapidly. His growth was even faster than that of an original clan member with an innate spiritual body. Now, Chun Zonka had far surpassed him. The difference between the rankings on the Heavenly General ranking was enormous. Although Green Nightmare was confident in his own talent and believed that he could enter the top 100, top 30, or even top 10 one day, he didn't know when that day would come. Chun Zong, on the other hand, had already entered the top 30 and was ranked 20th, leaving him far behind. However, ranking was one thing, and witnessing Chun Zong's strength with his own eyes was another. The ranking did not bring as much shock as witnessing it with his own eyes. Powerful, Qing Yin believed that he would not be able to block any of the 3 strikes, even if he unleashed all of his strength. He would be killed immediately. The gap was just too great. While feeling conflicted, Qing Yan's unwillingness to admit defeat rose up in him. He was an original clan member with an innate wind spiritual body. Was he really inferior to Chunzong? The competition between geniuses was not a temporary one, but a lifetime one. A temporary lead was shocking, but it did not mean that one would lead for the rest of their lives. There were many examples of great talents maturing late. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Qing Yan's fighting spirit rose up again, turning into a flame that burned fiercely. Chunzong and Qing Yan continued to sit down, drinking and chatting. As Chunzong conversed with Qing Yan, he activated the Heart Sutra, cultivating, comprehending, organizing, and other aspects simultaneously. Unknowingly, he was accumulating and improving bit by bit. If the Green Nightmare knew that Chunzong was capable of this, the fire of fighting spirit that had been ignited within him would have been extinguished and he would have been disheartened. Young friends, may the two of us shamelessly ask for a cup of fine wine? An old man asked politely as he walked over with a smile. His gaze swept past Qing Yan and landed on Chunzong's face. Accompanying the old man was a muscular middle-aged man in a short robe. Chunzong focused his gaze, and his pupils immediately shrank to the size of needles. A threat, a very strong threat. These two people were probably very strong, and he was probably no match for them. Although this feeling was not very accurate, it at least gave Chunzong some warning, letting him know how much of a threat they were to him. Could he defeat them? Once he felt that he was no match for them, he was at least 80% sure that he was no match for them. It's our honor to have you two seniors. Chunzong smiled slightly, not showing any humility or fawning. Instead, he responded calmly, neither hurriedly nor slowly. At the same time, he took out 2 wine cups, poured fine wine, and invited the two to sit down. He placed the cups in front of them and toasted them. Young friend, you're too polite, the middle-aged man said with a smile. He picked up his cup and drained it in a very forthright manner. Good wine, the middle-aged man said with a smile. They had come to befriend Chunzong, so of course they were more proactive. Chapter 2546. The middle-aged man's name was Ling Shan, and the old man's name was Yuan Kuang. Green Nightmare and Chunzong were slightly surprised when they heard their names. There was no other reason other than the fact that these two names were quite famous in Heaven Continent. It was said that Ling Shan and Yuan Kuang were good friends and were also independent cultivators. They were the pillars of the third realm independent cultivators and had the strength of the final realm. They were very powerful and extraordinary. Ling Shan and Yuan Kuang saw Chunzong's potential and wanted to befriend him. In addition, they were independent cultivators who had traveled around and seen a lot. When they talked, it was not boring. On the contrary, they had a lot of topics to talk about and had a lot to talk about. Yuan Kuang, in particular, was very experienced and witty. He had an unruly temperament, so it was quite comfortable to talk to him. Both of them were also Final Realm experts. Even when they talked about their experiences in cultivation, they had their own unique points. They gave Chunzong and Green Nightmare a lot of inspiration, especially Chunzong, who gained the most. Time passed. Chunzong's strength was not bad, and with Ling Shan and Yuan Kuang, 2 Final Realm experts, there was no one else who came to fight for this place. The spiritual wings that were repelled also did not attack Chunzong again. However, conflicts still broke out in other places from time to fight for a good spot. During the fight, Chunzong and the others also saw some powerful experts, such as Ling Shan and Yuan Kuang, who were also Final Realm experts. Chunzong even saw a Final Realm independent cultivator. He was a middle-aged man in a silver robe with a long saber at his waist. His aura was restrained, but when he opened and closed his eyes, there was a faint gleam. The gleam was so condensed that it was almost solid. It was as sharp and cold as the tip of a long saber. It was extremely frightening. When his gaze swept past, it felt as if the tip of a saber had sliced through it. It was a hair-raising feeling, as if it was being torn apart. That's Iron Slayer Swordsman Ing Han, a Final Realm expert. His Iron Slayer swordsmanship is extremely terrifying. Ling Shan's gaze was extremely solemn. Inghan was his real name, and Iron Slayer Swordsman was his title. Having a title meant that the person was extraordinary and was extremely shocking. Compared to Ling Shan and Yuan Kuang, they were both Final Realm experts, but they had not made a name for themselves. A title was a higher level of recognition. Shenzong took a deep look at the Iron Slayer Swordsman, Inghan, and then looked away. The perception of such a master was very sharp, so it was not good to look at him too much because he did not know what kind of person he was. If he was a fierce person, it would not be fun to look at him too much. Even if there were 10 of him, he would not be a match for a supreme realm master. He would probably be killed in one strike. Although Qinzong thought so, he was not afraid. One day, he would be able to reach the transcendent realm. When the last day arrived, the competition for the positions had also ended. Those who were capable managed to grab the good positions. Those who were average could only grab the average positions, and those who were weaker could only grab the worst positions. There were also some who couldn't even grab a position and couldn't see the situation in the valley at all. When the time came, they could only imagine the scene by listening to the sounds. A figure streaked across the sky with astonishing speed. There was also a type of domineering aura about it, as it directly descended into the valley. With a bang, a huge rock in the valley was struck and sunk. A tall and straight figure appeared on top of it. He was dressed in black and held a dragon-scale spear in his hand. His eyes were extremely sharp, and his aura swept out like a storm. It was incomparably mighty and majestic. It was extremely shocking. Its senior brother Yuan Jin. Green Nightmare's eyes lit up slightly. Qinzong had never seen Yuan Jin before, but his aura was indeed very shocking. He felt that it was not inferior to the Iron Slayer Swordsman. However, the Iron Slayer Swordsman was not on the Divine General ranking. It was not so easy to be on the Divine General ranking. Any master on the Divine General ranking was a master of the Transcendent Realm. As soon as Yuan Jin appeared, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone stared at him as if they wanted to see through him. Faced with countless gazes, Yuan Jin did not react at all. He stood straight and pointed at the sky like the spear in his hand. He stood there motionlessly, waiting for his opponent to arrive. Tap, tap, tap. Not long after, a series of light footsteps came from the entrance of the valley. The sound was not loud, but it seemed to reach everyone's ears. They could not help but look over. Even Yuan Jin, who had not moved or changed his expression all this time, was the same. At the entrance of the valley, a figure was walking over. He was neither fast nor slow. He walked evenly with a smile on his face. He carried a sword on his back, and his robe swayed gently with his steps. His aura was not strong at all. It did not seem like he was a master. Instead, he seemed like an ordinary cultivator. However, no one dared to underestimate him. Even if they had not seen his face with their own eyes, they knew that he was not ordinary just by hearing his name. He was the Dragon Swordsman. If he was not the Dragon Swordsman, who would step into the valley at such a time? "You're here," Yuan Jin said. "I'm here," the Dragon Swordsman replied with a smile. "Since you're here, let's start." As soon as Yuan Jin's voice sounded, a terrifying aura exploded and rushed into the sky. Behind Yuan Jin, a 120-foot-long dragon appeared. It was as if it could control the four seas. It was filled with a terrifying aura. "Take my spear." Yuan Jin suddenly leaped, and the huge rock under his feet shattered into countless pieces. He leaped into the air, and immediately he swung his long spear in mid-air. He and his spear became one. The 120 feet long divine form of the dragon erupted with astonishing power in an instant. In the void, there was an extremely resounding roar. The spear tore through the sky like a huge crossbow arrow, tearing through the air and shattering everything. How strong! Shenzong couldn't help but feel astonished when he saw that spear attack. He could see that it was a spear technique and not an AoE technique. However, its power was terrifying. A 120-foot-long divine image was indeed extraordinary. That spear attack contained 10 divine inscriptions. Its power was astonishing. That spear attack was extremely fast. It was incredibly powerful. It shot through the air and mercilessly shot towards the dragon swordsman. Facing such a terrifying spear attack, the dragon swordsman's expression didn't change. He naturally extended his hand and pulled out the long sword on his back. However, the moment the long sword was unsheathed, a terrifying sword intent rushed into the sky. It was as if it was going to break the sky. Vaguely, there seemed to be a terrifying, ear-piercing aura. Following that, a 120-foot-long divine image appeared. It was the dragon swordsman's primordial spirit dharma idol. Slash. When the sword was unsheathed, it slashed through the air. The 120-foot-long divine image also slashed out and exploded with a terrifying aura. The 11 divine inscriptions of the sword Tao also released a shocking aura. The spear that was shot through the air was instantly slashed apart. The sword light was like a hot knife cutting through butter. Yuan Jin's expression suddenly changed and became incomparably solemn. As expected of an expert on the divine general ranking, his attack was so extraordinary. Just a single sword technique was so shocking. That sword attack instantly caused the faces of the spectators in the valley to turn cold. Shenzong's eyes slightly narrowed as he was inwardly shocked. It seemed like a simple sword attack, but it contained a profound mystery. The profound of slash had probably been grasped to a rather profound level. The mystery of swordsmanship included the mystery of slashing. There were different levels of slashing, true meaning of slashing, profound meaning of slashing, and so on. This kind of classification was based on the level of understanding and mastery of that mystery. The difference in power and the difference in quality was also better. In essence, there were also differences. The spear aura exploded, and the spear light was like a waterfall. It instantly shattered the sky and shattered the sword light. Take my move, Imperial Dragon World. Yuan Jin's eyes flickered with cold light. The dragon divine image on his body instantly released an earth-shattering aura. Immediately, the long spear in Yuan Jin's hand seemed to come alive. Every dragon scale was filled with a powerful luster. It was as if it had really turned into a dragon. It exploded with an astonishing aura. In an instant, the spear shot through the air. It looked similar to the previous spear, but its power was several times stronger. Aowu. That spear was like an 11th level Aowu. Not all Transcendent Realm experts could master the Transcendent Aowu. Strictly speaking, the Transcendent Realm was also divided into the true Transcendent Realm and the pseudo-Transcendent Realm. The pseudo-Transcendent Realm referred to those who had cultivated their divine image to 120 zhang, but had not reached the corresponding realm in other aspects, such as Aowu, Great Path, and so on. The true Transcendent Realm was easy to understand. Divine Image, Great Path, Aowu, and so on had all been cultivated to the Transcendent Realm. Generally speaking, the 9,999 people on the Divine General ranking were all at the true Transcendent Realm. As for the demigod generals outside of the Divine General ranking, there was a huge divide. The so-called top demigod generals also had a huge gap in strength. For example, the low Transcendent Realm was the top demigod generals. The high Transcendent Realm was also the top demigod generals. However, some people called the Transcendent Realm experts who could not enter the Divine General ranking as the invincible demigod generals. It was unknown whether Yuan Jin was at the true Transcendent Realm or the pseudo-Transcendent Realm. If he was at the pseudo-Transcendent Realm, he might not be a match for the Dragon Swordsman. Interesting. Facing Yuan Jin's spear, the Dragon Swordsman suddenly revealed a smile. His long sword swiped, as if it was cutting something. Immediately, a fine sword light swept through the sky. That sword light was fine at first, but it quickly grew bigger, turning into a curved arc. It carried a terrifying sharpness. It made people who saw it feel as if their eyes were being cut apart. They could not help but feel a piercing pain. Vaguely, from that sword light, there seemed to be a ruthless roar that spread out, like the roar of an evil dragon. This sword was also at the 11th level of Aowu. It was extremely mysterious, causing Chun Zong's eyes to shine. Sure enough, this trip was right. Just by seeing the dragon swordsman's attack, his half a month of waiting was not in vain. Yuan Jin's spear shot out, followed by a series of spear shadows. There were a total of 9 shadows. It was the 9th level of the 9 layers mixed killing secret technique. Spear after spear bombarded, colliding with the sword light. It broke through layer by layer, shattering the sword light. The spear shadows crossed the sky and continued to attack the dragon swordsman. The 9 layers mixed killing secret technique of the 9 layers Heaven's Imperial Court. It is indeed extraordinary. Facing the incoming spear shadows, the dragon swordsman did not show the slightest fear. Instead, the smile on his face became more obvious. He even said aloud, as if he was commenting, Chapter 25:47. Boom! Yuan Jin became one with his spear. His spear descended, and Zhu Long's sword artist only needed to dodge to the side. The spear brushed past his body, and a terrifying force slammed into the ground behind Zhu Long's sword artist, creating a crater. Cracks spread out at an astonishing speed as the ground was violently torn apart. Yuan Jin's expression did not change as he grabbed the spear with his left hand and suddenly shook it. The body of the spear bent in an instant, then straightened in the next instant as it swept towards the dragon sword artist. The dragon sword artist did not dodge this time. Instead, he waved his sword and blocked the incoming spear attack, displaying a shocking amount of power. Spear art, sword art. The two immediately engaged in close combat. When cultivators fought, it was impossible to only use the AO Wu. The AO Wu was indeed powerful, but it also consumed a lot of energy. It was destined that it could not be used continuously. Using martial arts to fight and looking for opportunities to use the AO Wu's attack was the right way to fight. Yuan Jin's spear art was shocking. Each of his spear attacks contained a terrifying amount of power as they continuously shot out. They were like flood dragons and dragons as they coiled around the dragon sword artist like a real dragon. The dragon's claws swept across the sky, and the dragon's tail swayed in the air. Each of his attacks contained a shocking amount of power. This kind of spear art was extremely powerful and violent. The spectators could not help but shiver as they watched. They felt that if they were in the same position, they would be torn apart. However, the dragon sword artist did not seem to be torn apart at all. On the contrary, he easily used his sword art to block each of Yuan Jin's spear attacks. Chunzong's eyes narrowed as he activated the One Heart Sutra to the One Heart 10 poetic realms. He did not just put himself in the shoes of one person, but both of them. For example, he put himself in the shoes of the dragon sword artist and thought about how to deal with Yuan Jin's spear art. At the same time, he put himself in the shoes of Yuan Jin and thought about how to fight against him. In terms of strength, Chunzong was no match for the two of them. He estimated that he would be defeated and killed in one blow. However, putting aside strength, purely in terms of swordsmanship and spear arts, Chunzong was not afraid at all. On the contrary, he was full of confidence to compete with them. It could be seen that Yuan Jin's spear arts were still at the basic level. He should have reached the pinnacle of the basic level and was just a hair's breadth away from the great Dao spear arts. The dragon swordsman's swordsmanship was even more advanced. He had already stepped into the level of the great path of swordsmanship. However, it was not very profound. He had probably only grasped the surface of it. He had not truly reached the entry level. However, their combat experience was extremely rich, and their strength was tyrannical. As a result, their spear and sword techniques were pushed to a terrifying level. By putting himself in their shoes and pretending to be their opponent, Chunzong was able to hone his skills. Attack, dissolve, counterattack. Sword light flashed in Chunzong's eyes, and the aura around him surged. Traces of understanding were constantly being generated, and the sparks of inspiration were also flickering, becoming more and more intense. This kind of fake battle was undoubtedly very taxing on one's mind. Fortunately, Chunzong's mind was strong enough to maintain it for a period of time. Yuan Jin displayed his spear art and attacked crazily. He was like a raging dragon that did not put up any defense. All he did was attack, attack, and attack. However, the dragon swordsman blocked all of Yuan Jin's attacks with his superb swordsmanship. No matter how violent Yuan Jin's attacks were, they could not penetrate the dragon swordsman's defense. Yuan Long. Fury. Under the continuous spear art, Yuan Jin seemed to have accumulated enough strength and momentum. In an instant, he raised his spear and suddenly blasted it out. A dragon shadow rose from his body, causing the power of the spear to increase dramatically. Rank 11 AO Wu, Yuan Long's Fury. This was a peak 11th rank profound martial art. It was tyrannical and direct, and it was amplified by the 9-layered chaotic killing technique. Spear shadows followed, and there were a total of 9 of them, causing the power of this attack to become even more terrifying. The dragon swordsman's defense was instantly broken, and he was sent flying. His blood was in turmoil, and his aura was in a mess. Is this your strongest attack? In just an instant, Swordmaster Zhu Long's surging chi calmed down. His eyes shot out a ray of light as he stared at Yuan Jin and said in a neither fast nor slow manner, "If your strength is limited to this, then this battle is over." After he finished speaking, the dragon swordsman actually sheathed his sword and turned to leave. "Stop right there." Yuan Jin was instantly enraged. "Is he looking down on me? He is obviously looking down on me." Burn! Flames burned on Yuan Jin's body, and his aura became stronger. Yuan Long's Fury. In an instant, the dragon scale spear in his hand seemed to come alive, and it turned into a raging flood dragon. It was covered in a layer of flames, and it shot towards the dragon swordsman. This attack was enhanced by another secret technique, and its lethality increased once again. The stronger the secret technique, the harder it was to use it. After using this secret technique, the power of this attack had nearly doubled, and the 9-fold mixed killing secret technique was unable to enhance it. In the valley, a resounding dragon roar seemed to resound, and it shook everyone's eardrums. Some of the weaker cultivators couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. The furious attack seemed to be able to shatter the void, and the terrifying spear aura enveloped the dragon swordsman, as if it wanted to shatter him into pieces. In an instant, the dragon swordsman's long sword left its sheath, and it instantly exploded with a shocking light. The sword was so dazzling that it caused everything in the surroundings to lose its color, turning into a plain black and white. Slash! It was hard to describe how dazzling that sword was. It seemed to have taken away all the colors in the world, and the sharpness of the sword swept across the entire valley, causing everyone to feel terrified. It seemed like they would be cut in half in an instant, and even the Iron Slayer swordsman felt the same way. A shocking saber intent erupted from his body to resist the attack. Under that sword, the dragon-like spear light was shattered. Yuan Jin's expression changed drastically, and he was extremely shocked. He unleashed all his power, but he couldn't resist. The 9 mysterious body protecting technique on his body was broken layer by layer, and the 9th layer was completely destroyed. He was sent flying by the sword light, and blood spurted out from his mouth. The sword returned to its sheath, and the dazzling sword light also disappeared. The dragon swordsman didn't attack again, because that sword had already severely injured Yuan Jin. Even if Yuan Jin wanted to, he wouldn't be able to attack again. Fortunately, the dragon swordsman wasn't a bloodthirsty person, or else Yuan Jin would have already been killed. The strength of the Divine General's ranking is too terrifying. They're both transcendent realm experts, but the difference is so huge. What a joke! The experts of the Divine General's ranking are all real transcendent realm experts. Yuan Jin is just a fake transcendent realm expert. The Iron Slayer swordsman clenched his saber tightly, and in the end, he let go of his saber. His sharp saber intent also dissipated. This battle had made his blood boil. He really wanted to attack, but he also knew that his strength wasn't much different from Yuan Jin's. It was still unknown whether he could defeat Yuan Jin. However, Yuan Jin had been easily defeated by the dragon swordsman. Anyone with a bit of insight could see that the dragon swordsman hadn't used his full strength to defeat Yuan Jin, because Yuan Jin didn't have the qualifications to make him use his full strength. This was the strength of the Divine General's ranking. Even if the dragon swordsman's ranking was very low, it couldn't be denied that his strength was astonishing. Chunzong stared at the back of the dragon swordsman as he left. Traces of sword intent constantly lingered and condensed, almost soaring into the sky, but he suppressed it. Now wasn't the time. His strength was still far from enough to compete with a Transcendent Realm expert. Not to mention a Transcendent Realm expert. He wasn't even a match for a high Transcendent Realm expert. Even in the low Transcendent Realm, there were still many people stronger than him. However, the benefits of this battle were definitely not small. If he grasped it well, it would be enough to further increase his strength. After the dragon swordsman left, the crowd also left one after another. After all, the battle was over. Among the crowd, there were a few inconspicuous people who were the fastest, directly heading in the direction of the dragon swordsman. However, no one noticed their movements because it was too normal. As disciples of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, Chunzong and Qing Yin naturally wouldn't ignore Yuan Jin's injuries. If they were attacked by someone with ill intentions, they might be killed. That would be a loss for the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Aside from Chunzong and Qing Yin, there were also other disciples of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court who had watched the battle. There were low Transcendent and high Transcendent Realm experts. With these disciples escorting him, Yuan Jin took a pill to heal his injuries, recovering a portion of his strength. Thus, he returned to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court safely. Once he returned to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, Chunzong immediately bid farewell to the others and returned to the Heartsword Peak to cultivate in seclusion. In Chunzong's mind, that battle kept flashing. He grasped every detail of it. Whether it was Yuan Jin or the dragon swordsman, their strength was extremely terrifying. They were many times stronger than Chunzong. As for spear techniques and sword techniques, although they weren't on the same level as his Great Path sword techniques, their application was unique. It was worth learning and using, absorbing the essence, and integrating it into his own sword techniques to improve. Within the Heartsword Palace, Chunzong started cultivating in seclusion again. It was normal for cultivators at the Third Realm to cultivate in seclusion. For example, Qing Yin also immediately went into seclusion after bidding farewell. If one had comprehended something, it was naturally better to digest it as soon as possible. Otherwise, as time passed, the impression of the comprehension would fade until it completely disappeared. By then, it would be impossible to recomprehend it, even if one wanted to. It would be a waste of a great opportunity. It was rare to see a battle between Transcendent Realm experts, let alone an expert on the Divine General ranking. The universe was vast and boundless. There were 9,999 experts on the Divine General ranking. If they were spread out, it would be difficult to find even one expert on a continent. After all, the experts on the Divine General ranking would basically go out to train and seek opportunities. They would further explore their own potential until they reached a point where they couldn't improve any further. Then, they would look for opportunities to break through to the Fourth Realm and become a Fourth Realm expert. Within the secret chamber of the Heartsword Palace, Chunzong pulled out his sword and stabbed out. The sword light was swift and light, with an indescribable agility. It carried the power of the fusion of the path of the heart and the path of the sword, causing the sword to be extremely powerful. It was as if there was an enemy in front of him and he was going to pierce through it. But in reality, there was nothing in front of him. It was just Chunzong pretending that he was fighting senior brother Yuan Jin. Chapter 25:48. Time passed like a tide. In the void, Chun Xiu swung his sword again and again. Every strike contained shocking sharpness and dominance. Terrifying killing intent condensed in it, as if it could devour all life. Yunyanqin was also cultivating. He was extremely diligent in his cultivation and focused more on improving his basic sword techniques. Now, they all had 12-star combat strength and were well-known prodigies in the Yuan underworld realm in the Void. It was difficult to find a worthy opponent. However, it was still not enough. According to Qinzong, the universe was even more dangerous. Strength in the Void was nothing. 12-star in the Void was nothing compared to the universe. Therefore, they had to become stronger. Qinzong had more or less explained the situation of the human race to them. The human race was weak. Therefore, they had to become stronger, at least not for others, but for themselves. Now, they were getting closer to the once-in-a-century test. In the Nine Heavens universe, there were suddenly waves of energy spreading on the 9 continents. The fluctuation was weak at first, but it increased at an astonishing speed. It swept out like a rolling storm, spreading in all directions. It covered the sky and covered the earth. It was vast and boundless, and it immediately caused a great commotion. Immediately after, the void split open from the point where the aura spread. Cracks appeared and spread rapidly until they finally stopped at 100 meters wide, like the mouth of a giant beast. A large amount of aura gushed out from the crack in a frenzy. The impact was like a torrent. Alarm! The entire Nine Heavens universe was alarmed. Powerhouses moved out one after another and appeared next to the 100-meter crack. What an astonishing aura! This aura is clearly the aura of the Realm Tao. Let's go in and take a look. When the group of 5th Realm powerhouses wanted to enter the 100-meter crack, they discovered that an extremely powerful force was blocking them. They could not enter at all. Even if they used all of their strength to force their way in, they could not do so. At that moment, 6th-level powerhouses arrived. 5th-level powerhouses were kings, and 6th-level powerhouses were emperors. Each level was a different world. The gap between the 5th level and the 6th level was indescribable. The 6th realm cultivator made his move, intending to enter the crack as well. However, he was still obstructed. In fact, when he tried to force his way in, he was directly sent flying backward. His chi and blood were in turmoil, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth uncontrollably. This scene immediately caused the group of powerhouses to be inwardly shocked. What was going on? Even a 6th-level Emperor Realm cultivator couldn't enter? After several attempts, level 6 powerhouses were indeed unable to enter. Research. He could only continue to research and experiment in other aspects. Among the 5th Realm and 6th Realm cultivators, there was no lack of knowledgeable individuals. In the end, after many attempts, research, and exchanges with the 6th Realm cultivators of the 9 Overlord-level forces, they came to a shocking conclusion. This was left behind by a martial emperor. This result greatly surprised them. The Great Emperor Realm was the 7th level. It was a realm above the 6th level, the Great Emperor Realm, and was many times more powerful than a Great Emperor Realm cultivator. If an Emperor Realm cultivator could dominate a universe, then an Emperor Realm cultivator could be considered a top powerhouse in the universe. There were no Emperor Realm experts in the Nine Heavens universe. After trying, flipping through ancient books, searching for information, and other methods, they finally came to a conclusion. This was the appearance of a secret realm left behind by the Great Emperor Realm World Lord. The World Lord was a strong cultivator from 100,000 years ago, a 7th-level Great Emperor. He comprehended the Tao of the world, and his attainments were astonishing. His secret realms had appeared a few times. Calculating the pattern, they would appear once every 10,000 years, and each time, they would appear in a different place. They didn't expect it to appear in the Nine Heavens universe this time. Moreover, there was an entrance on every continent. This was an opportunity. This was a great opportunity that belonged to the Nine Heavens universe. Since level 6 and level 5 powerhouses couldn't enter, then they would let those with a lower cultivation base enter. If it was really a secret realm left behind by the Great Emperor Realm, then according to the pattern of the past, only those below the 4th level could enter. In other words, the most suitable person to enter was the 3rd level. As for the second level, they could also enter. However, if a second level entered, it was purely because they didn't want to die quickly enough. Opportunities required a certain level of strength to obtain them. Immediately, the 9 Overlord-level forces of the 9 Heavens universe took action. Seal. The entrance to the secret realm was directly sealed, preventing others from entering. Only the level 3 powerhouses of the 9 forces were qualified to enter. This method was undoubtedly very tyrannical. However, in the world of cultivators, strength was the truth. Perhaps he would be criticized by others, but so what? When an opportunity appeared, of course he had to grab it and take it for himself. That was the most important thing. This was what any force would do. The 9 forces were the overlords of the 9 continents. They were invincible. Even if the other forces of the 9 continents combined, they still wouldn't be a match for the 9 forces. Firstly, there was a difference in the number of level 5 powerhouses. Secondly, the 9 forces had level 6 powerhouses while the other forces didn't. This was the fundamental difference. Could one do whatever they wanted just because they had strength? The 9 forces used facts to tell you that with strength, one could really do whatever they wanted. Of course, they wouldn't really do whatever they wanted. Otherwise, they would be punished by the heavens. However, in the fight for opportunities, of course, they had to do their best. Another point was that this secret realm left behind by the World Master was only known to the upper echelons of the 9 forces. This kind of news naturally wouldn't be spread out. It was only circulated within the 9 forces. Because of this, the other forces and lone cultivators didn't know the specific reason. However, even if they didn't know the specific reason, it must be an amazing opportunity to be treated so seriously by the 9 forces. Unite! The various forces and lone cultivators of the 9 continents immediately united and requested to open the secret realm so that they could also obtain that opportunity. Even if they weren't as strong as the 9 forces, the alliance of the various forces and lone cultivators was still a shocking force. Unfortunately, under the might of the level 6 powerhouses of the 9 forces, this alliance was useless. However, in the end, the 9 forces didn't push things too far. After some discussion, they agreed to allow the other forces and lone cultivators to enter. However, there were conditions. They had to pay a certain amount of Cosmos God crystals and limit the number of people who could enter. This was also the biggest condition that the various forces and lone cultivators could fight for. Heartsword Peak, Heartsword Palace. Shenzong had just come out of seclusion when he received a message from Senior Lin Ming, asking him to immediately rush to the Dao Alliance's headquarters. When Shenzong arrived at the Dao Alliance's headquarters, he found that other than himself, Gu Rui, Yi Daolin, and the other Dao Alliance's Sky Prides were also present. It seemed like something big was about to happen. What surprised Shenzong even more was that he saw the Primitive Emperor. The Primitive Emperor, the current Dao Alliance's leader. Even the Primitive Emperor had appeared and gathered the Sky Prides of the Dao Alliance. Something important must be happening. For some reason, Shenzong had an inexplicable expectation. The secret realm left behind by the World Master has appeared again. This time, it appeared in our 9 Clouds universe. One of the entrances is located on the Heaven continent. The Primitive Emperor didn't beat around the bush and said very directly. The World Master was an Emperor Realm powerhouse who ran rampant in the universe 100,000 years ago. The secret realm left behind by him appears once every 10,000 years. This is the 10th time. Shenzong and the others listen with bated breath. They were very shocked. Emperor Realm, a 7th realm powerhouse. Although the 9 Heavens Imperial Court and the other 9 major forces in the 9 Clouds universe were created by 7th realm Emperor Realm powerhouses, the strongest among them was now a 6th realm powerhouse. Ever since the 7th realm ancestor disappeared without a trace, no 7th realm powerhouse was born. A secret realm left behind by a 7th realm powerhouse was very shocking. What they didn't know was that the World Master was much stronger than the 7th realm ancestor who created the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. Similarly, seventh realm powerhouses were also divided into strong and weak. Within the world's secret grounds, there are opportunities as well as dangers. Not just anyone can enter. This time around, our Tao Alliance will select 103rd level Tao disciples to give it a try. However, the number of people who can enter in the end will depend on their own capabilities, the primitive emperors said solemnly. Third realm cultivators could enter the world mystic realm. However, it was unknown whether all third realm cultivators could enter. According to past examples, third realms seemed to have to go through some tests or qualifications to see if they were capable enough to enter. Mediocre people couldn't enter the secret realm. After the selection of people, they immediately set off for the entrance of the secret realm. There were more than 2,000 disciples in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. In addition, there were more than 5,000 disciples from other forces and independent cultivators in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Each of them had a very shocking aura. If a group of forces and independent cultivators wanted to enter the secret realm, they had to pay Cosmos divine crystals to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Therefore, they had to choose people carefully and try their best to pass the test and enter the secret realm. Otherwise, it would be a waste of Cosmos divine crystals. Otherwise, there would be more people. Although there was a limit, more than 5,000 people was quite a lot. However, it was hard to say how many people could enter in the end. If they wanted to enter, the Nine Heavens Imperial Court's people would enter first. Only after the Nine Heavens Imperial Court's people had tried would it be the other forces and independent cultivators' turn. Even in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, there were differences. The origin race was a native race of the universe, and the primordial was the number one force in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Naturally, the primordial people would be the first to enter. One after another, third realms of the origin race rushed into the 100-meter crack. After a period of time, those who entered were ejected out. It was as if a giant had grabbed them from the 100-meter crack and thrown them out. They were in a very sorry state. The primordial people had the most people, occupying half of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court's people. There were more than 1,000 of them. However, in the end, more than 90% of them failed and were ejected out of the 100-meter crack. Only less than 10% of them successfully entered. Then, it was the turn of the demon tribe, heavenly human tribe, and the other four races from the first order void. In the end, it was even worse. Only 5% of them entered, and the remaining 95% all failed and were ejected out. Chapter 25:49. Chunzong stamped his feet, and his power burst out. In an instant, he soared into the sky. His whole body was like a beam of sword light, rushing directly into the 100-meter-long crack. As soon as he entered, Chunzong felt an invisible pressure coming directly from the front, as if it was going to blow him away. However, Chunzong faced the invisible pressure and kept moving forward. The further Chunzong went, the more intense the invisible impact pressure became. It pressed down madly, causing Chunzong's forward momentum to be hindered even more. It felt like a spring that was constantly being pressed down, but the rebound force was even more shocking. Chunzong finally knew why those people were ejected. It was because of the situation in front of him. The further he went, the greater the pressure. When the pressure kept increasing and accumulating to the extreme, the explosive rebound would be extremely terrifying and incomparably amazing. This was the so-called test. Such a test could be described as simple and violent. Go, go, go. Because if he did not go, he would be bounced back and would not have the opportunity to enter the so-called secret realm of the world. What mysteries did the secret realm left behind by an Emperor Realm expert contain? The Emperor Realm expert was called the World Lord. It was said that he majored in the World Tao, and one of the three great Taos that he had mastered was the World Tao. Perhaps he could obtain a great opportunity to deepen his understanding of the World Tao and become stronger in it. Therefore, no matter what, he must enter this secret realm. Go! Facing the increasing pressure, Chunzong's sword essence broke out. It was like a divine sword breaking through the air, tearing apart all the pressure and pushing forward layer by layer. Nothing could stop his sword essence. If there was, then it would be cut into pieces. His belief was unparalleled, and his sword essence was invincible. Go! At some point in time, Chunzong suddenly felt the pressure disappear, and his incomparably sharp aura seemed to have disappeared in an instant. However, Chunzong reacted in an instant, and his aura was completely restrained, and he was able to retract and release it freely, displaying astonishing control. Falling. Chunzong could clearly feel that his body was falling rapidly, but strangely, there was no sound of wind. It was as if he was falling into nothingness. That feeling was extremely strange. Immediately, Chunzong felt that his toes touched something. With a light tap, he raised his chi and lightened his body. It was as if a curtain was pulled open in front of him, and a green mountain and clear water appeared in front of him. Below his feet was the dark green surface of the lake. With the tip of his feet as the center, layers of ripples were slowly spreading out. What a beautiful world with beautiful scenery. The moment Chunzong sighed, his eyes moved slightly. He exerted force with the tip of his foot, and the ripples became more intense. His body also soared into the sky. At the same time, with a violent roar, a shocking splash suddenly rose to the sky, as if it carried the terrifying power of a thunderbolt, directly hitting Chunzong in the sky. Amidst the splashes, a pitch-black figure was faintly discernible. There seemed to be specks of cold light flickering around it. It was extremely frightening. Chunzong narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he could see through the layers of splashes, and saw the pitch-black figure. It was a strange fish, about 3 meters long, pitch-black, with a big head and a body full of snake patterns. The strange fish opened its mouth, which was full of fine, saw-like teeth. Chunzong had no doubt that once he was bitten, he would be immediately crushed. Body refining divine form, 100 feet. Slash! The sword was unsheathed in an instant. Looking down from above, he slashed down. The sword light turned into a crescent moon, carrying the fusion power of the world Tao and sword principle. It was extremely domineering and powerful, and the sword was overpowering. World swordsmanship. The swordsmanship focused on power. When the sword fell, it was as if it was invincible. Suddenly, the splashes that soared into the sky were cut apart, revealing the strange black fish. The sword light slashed down as if it carried the amazing power of one side of the world, and directly slashed the head of the strange fish. When the sword came into contact with the head of the strange fish, Chunzong felt that it was astonishingly hard, as if it was made of fine steel. But under the sword, it was still cut apart. The sword cut in from the head and came out from the tail. The sword was cut in two, and blood splashed down, dyeing the lake red. The originally green lake water was dyed scarlet, and it became even more strange. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. In an instant, strange sounds of water splashing could be heard. One black shadow after another appeared at the bottom of the dark green lake, rapidly growing larger. Strange black fish. It was a school of strange black fish, and they were attracted by the blood and the falling body of the strange fish. Chunzong saw with his own eyes that the body of the strange black fish that he had cut off was being eaten by the strange black fish below. In just a breath, it was completely devoured. Even the lake water that was stained red with blood was swallowed, and it returned to its original green color. Pairs of black eyes were staring at Chunzong's figure in the sky, and Chunzong could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. They were staring at him as if he was food. Third realm cultivators could not really fly in the air and could only hover in the air for a short period of time. Chunzong's figure began to fall, and the large fish heads of the strange black fish floated to the surface of the water. They opened their huge mouths slightly, and their sawtooth-like teeth shone with a piercing cold light. One look at them, and one would feel dizzy. These strange black fish were like baby fish that weighed a few thousand kilograms waiting to be fed. It was as if Chunzong would be immediately dismembered once he landed. Slash! Chunzong slashed his sword down again, and the power of the world sword technique erupted again. With the power of this sword, Chunzong leaped into the air and rushed forward like a swan. Once, twice, thrice, and every time he borrowed the force, Chunzong's figure rushed out like a swan at lightning speed. He finally rushed out of the green lake and landed on the grass. The grass was soft, and the feeling of stepping on it was very comfortable. Chunzong's gaze swept across, and his footsteps did not stop at all. He walked in a direction that his intuition told him to go. Not long after, Chunzong encountered another 100 feet tall giant bear. It seemed to have come from ancient times, and it emitted extremely terrifying aura fluctuations. It was extremely powerful, and Chunzong's expression was extremely solemn. He unsheathed his sword and immediately attacked. World Sword Technique. The reason why Chunzong did not perform the Heart Sword Technique was that he wanted to practice the World Sword Technique. The Heart Sword Technique and the World Sword Technique focused on different things. If one really had to describe it, the Heart Sword Technique that Chunzong mastered was more inclined toward technique, while the World Sword Technique was more inclined toward strength. Technique and strength each had their own merits. However, Chunzong had a feeling that both strength and technique must be mastered and improved at the same time, just like a chi refinement and physique refinement cultivation. There was no reason. It was just a feeling and intuition. Now, the Heart Sword Technique had reached the small success level, while the World Sword Technique was only at the entry level. Of course, in terms of frontal attack power, the entry-level World Sword Technique was not inferior to the Heart Sword Technique at the small success level. Actual combat was the best way to improve the realm of swordsmanship. In the face of Chunzong's majestic and domineering sword, the giant bear did not retreat. It suddenly roared, and the sound waves exploded. Its huge body suddenly moved forward, and its giant palm was raised and suddenly struck down. Boom! The wind roared, and the strong wind overflowed. The palm seemed to be constantly enlarging. It was like a small hill falling from the sky. It was extremely heavy and powerful. It shattered everything. Such a palm was truly terrifying to the extreme. However, Chunzong did not dodge at all. The 200 feet tall divine forms swung their swords and collided directly. With a bang, it was like two mountains colliding with each other. It directly burst out with an extremely shocking shock wave, shattering all the plants in the surroundings. Cracks were blasted open on the ground, and they quickly spread out. Chunzong and the giant bear shook one after another and instantly retreated. However, in an instant, Chunzong directly pounced on it, raised his sword again, and suddenly slashed out. The World Sword Technique was so simple and direct. The release of that kind of power was hearty and extremely domineering. One sword after another, Chunzong did not perform AO Wu. Instead, he constantly performed the World Sword Technique. The sword light flashed, and each sword carried amazing power. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Under Chunzong's sword, the 10-foot giant bear actually retreated step by step. Its massive feet stomped on the ground, leaving behind one deep footprint after another. Retreat, retreat, retreat. The giant bear roared again and again, and its eyes were filled with anger and grievance. It was too cruel and too aggrieved for a giant beast like it to be treated like this. One had to know that strength was his forte. Slash! In the end, the giant bear was beheaded by Chunzong. Its huge head rolled to one side, and blood spurted out crazily from its neck like a fountain. However, Chunzong easily avoided it, and none of it could affect Chunzong. Awesome! Chunzong could not help but smile. There was a kind of domineering sharpness in his aura. With a shake of his wrist, the sword body trembled, and the little bits of blood stuck on it sputtered away. The sword returned to its original clear as snow. That kind of feeling just now was really satisfying. Then, let's do it again. Chunzong continued to move in the direction that his intuition told him. Along the way, once he encountered a beast, he directly killed it with the World Sword Technique, so that the World Sword Technique could be tempered in life and death. This was life and death, it was life and death. This secret realm seemed to be very big. Everyone who entered here would randomly appear in various places and continue to move forward. Not long after, Chunzong met a disciple of the Seven Profound Sword Sect. "It's you." The gaze of the Seven Profound Sword Sect disciple flickered with bright lights as he stared at Chunzong's face, seeming to have recognized Chunzong, and his eyes instantly emitted extremely fierce cold lights that carried slight hatred. The moment his voice fell, the Seven Profound Sword Sect disciple unleashed all of his strength. His divine image appeared, and his sword pierced through the sky. Chunzong also recognized his opponent. He was one of the Seven Profound Sword Sect disciples that he had killed in the Divine Image Secret Realm. Moreover, he had killed him twice. It was because of this that he had a deeper impression of him. However, in the Divine Image Secret Realm, only the power of the Divine Image was used. It was not the real cultivation base. Therefore, when the Seven Profound Sword Sect disciple met Chunzong here, he did not hesitate to brandish his sword at him. He was confident in his own strength. Unfortunately, his divine image had not broken through the limit. It was only 90 feet. Even if it had reached the peak of 90 feet, it would still be 90 feet. However, Chunzong's divine image had already broken through the limit. It was 30 feet. The other party's sword strike was merciless and filled with a shocking killing intent. Chunzong's lips curled up slightly as he dashed forward. At the same time, he unsheathed his sword and slashed out mercilessly with the world sword technique. Chapter 2550. A sword to decide life and death. The Seven Profound Sword Sect's disciple widened his eyes as he died. It was impossible. Why was his true strength far inferior to his opponent? He hadn't even fully displayed his skills. After killing him mercilessly, the items in his opponent's storage ring naturally became Chunzong's spoils of war. However, Chunzong threw away his opponent's storage ring. It was useless to keep it. Instead, it might bring some unnecessary trouble. Marching, fighting, practicing his sword. Chunzong's goal was simple and pure. Naturally, he would encounter others along the way. However, in most cases, if there were no treasures or conflicts, they wouldn't fight. They would live in peace and look for opportunities. Everyone who entered this mystic realm was here to look for opportunities. Only fools would fight for no reason and exhaust themselves. Chunzong wasn't sure how many people from the Tao Alliance had entered this time. However, according to the previous ratio, there shouldn't be more than 10, or even only a few. The beasts inside were very strong. Chunzong only needed to fight and kill them with his world sword technique. Of course, he would also encounter powerful beasts that he couldn't defeat. Chunzong discovered that beasts that were 10 feet in size were like the low extremity realm. Beasts that were 10 feet in size were like the high extremity realm. As for those that were 12 feet in size, needless to say, they were the ultra extremity realm. When encountering beasts that were 10 feet in size, Chunzong would try to fight them, and then use the 9 void extreme escape technique to escape. However, when he saw beasts that were 12 feet in size, Chunzong didn't have the slightest intention to fight them, because once he fought, he might not even have the chance to use the 9 void extreme escape technique. Chunzong wanted to sharpen his world sword technique, but he wouldn't court death. Unknowingly, Chunzong approached the center of the secret realm and saw a towering hall. The hall's appearance was very interesting. It was square in shape, like a huge black cube standing on the ground, standing in the center of the secret realm. According to the information provided by the primitive emperor, what the world lord left behind was in the world great hall in the center of the secret realm. As for what was outside the world great hall, it was just supplementary, like some medicinal herbs and ores. This also meant that they would face greater danger after entering the world hall. However, Chunzong was not afraid. Within the world hall, there might be something that he wanted, a fortuitous encounter or something. There was no door to the black square hall, as if it was made of a huge piece of black metal. As he approached it, Chunzong could feel an indescribable pressure and coldness. Soon after, Chunzong also saw someone touch the wall of the World Hall. His body immediately melted into it, as if he was being absorbed and disappeared. Chunzong approached and extended his sword. When he touched the wall that was emitting an astonishing cold pressure, it was as if he had plunged in a sticky water. Then a suction force emerged. Under the suction force, Chunzong found that he couldn't retreat at all and could only be forcefully pulled in. It was as if he had fallen into sticky water. The feeling was indescribable, but it lasted for a very short time. Chunzong appeared in a small house that was only a few square meters in size. The house was pitch black and emitted a cold aura. It seemed to be made of the same material as what he saw outside. No, Chunzong was sure that it was the same. He reached out and touched it, but he didn't merge into it. Instead, he was blocked. It was cold and hard to the touch. Chunzong clenched his hand into a fist, using the strength of his body refinement, and directly punched out. He only felt an astonishing toughness. That toughness completely blocked his fist, and the rebounding force caused his fist to ache. Slash! Chunzong's sword slashed out and landed directly on the wall, but it bounced back. The wall was still pitch black and didn't leave a single mark. Chunzong couldn't help but gasp. Terrifying. The hardness of this wall was truly terrifying. One must know that even if that strike wasn't his full-strength strike, it was still a very powerful strike. Yet, it didn't even leave a single mark. Holy shit. They're actually all forged from mysterious nether steel. All of them. Crazy. Crazy. I'm going crazy. It's too extravagant, too extravagant. At another place, someone had a face full of surprise and bewilderment as he carefully studied it, and he instantly cried out without end. He was filled with disbelief and shock, and he made a fuss like a country bumpkin that had never seen the world. It was no wonder he was like this. This was mysterious black nether steel, a top-grade metal. It was a treasure that was difficult to obtain, even for 5th realm experts. To 3rd realm experts, it was practically priceless. However, what made people even more frustrated was that there were priceless treasures in front of them. Moreover, there were so many of them that it was impossible to count. Yet, they couldn't even take a single piece. Not to mention a single piece, they couldn't even scrape off a bit of powder from it. What was this? They could only sigh and lament at the sight of the treasures, but they couldn't do anything about it in the end. Those who enter my world hall are fated. If you obtain a world seal fragment, you can exchange it at the various world deity statues. A forceful and domineering voice sounded as if it had traveled through time and space. It directly sounded in the ears of everyone who entered the world hall, but also sounded as if it was ringing directly in their ears. Immediately, Chunzong discovered that the originally sealed room suddenly opened. Amidst a series of ear-piercing sounds, an exit about a meter wide appeared. Chunzong took a step forward. Sweeping left and right, a passageway extended out. The end of the passageway was pitch black and filled with an astonishingly deep chill. Without hesitation, Chunzong directly walked to the left. As he walked, he actually encountered another crossroad. Once again, he chose a direction to walk in. Immediately, Chunzong saw a dim light floating in midair about 2 meters above the ground. Upon closer inspection, the dim light was about the size of a fist. Inside it was a black fragment, a world seal fragment. Chunzong immediately revealed a hint of joy. He didn't sense any danger. He took a step forward and instantly neared the fragment. He stretched out his hand and immediately grabbed it, as if he was plucking stars and grabbing the moon. The dim light dissipated, revealing the black fragment within. It was cold to the touch, but it made Chunzong's palms sink slightly. Chunzong was secretly speechless. So heavy, Chunzong couldn't help but exclaim softly. It was indeed very heavy. Now, such an inconspicuous small fragment weighed more than 5,000 kilograms. It was simply unbelievable. Fortunately, Chunzong's body refining cultivation was quite strong. His strength was more than 5,000 kilograms, so he could completely hold it. Holding the black fragment, Chunzong couldn't help but examine it carefully. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was covered with deep lines. Those lines were faintly discernible. If one didn't stare at it deliberately, it would be difficult to discover them. Chunzong stared fixedly at those runic lines. The runic lines looked extremely messy and disorderly. However, Chunzong felt an inexplicable stirring within him. This stirring came from the Tao of the world. Lord of the world, world seal fragment. Is this a treasure related to the world Tao? Chunzong couldn't help guessing secretly. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't understand anything. It seemed that something was missing. Soon, Chunzong realized that it was because the fragment was too fragmented. There were too few lines on it. It was too fragmented. In this case, let's find more world seal fragments, Chunzong said to himself. Immediately, he put away the black fragment. To find the world seal fragment, he also needed to find the world god statue. It was very likely that he would encounter many dangers here. Chunzong wouldn't relax at all. He would advance step by step. Not long after, Chunzong met someone else. It was an unknown person who emitted a strong aura. His eyes were cold. As soon as he saw Chunzong, he attacked him directly. Chunzong immediately drew his sword. The sword light soared into the sky and was incomparably overbearing. After the attack, the opponent immediately flew back. He didn't have any intention to attack again. He quickly flew away like a piece of paper in the wind. Chunzong didn't chase after him. He sheathed his sword. If the opponent hadn't attacked him first, Chunzong wouldn't have drawn his sword. After the attack, the opponent must have realized that he was not to be trifled with, so he quickly retreated. That should be it. As he thought, Chunzong walked toward another passageway. After that, Chunzong saw a 13 m tall statue. Surprisingly, the statue was in the shape of a human, and it was completely pitch black. It seemed to be made of the same material as the walls and the surroundings, and it was suffused with strands of extremely profound fluctuations of aura. At first glance, Chunzong felt that the statue was lifelike, as if it would come to life at any time. However, he couldn't see its face clearly. It was only a blur, as if it was covered by fog. The world deity statue? Chunzong said to himself. He observed it carefully, but he couldn't see anything special about it. However, the voice mentioned that if he found the world deity statue, he could exchange it with a world seal fragment. How could he exchange it? Chunzong approached the statue. In an instant, a layer of dim light spread out from the statue. It was unbelievably fast, faster than Chunzong could react. It had already covered Chunzong's body. Chunzong could feel that the layer of dim light did not harm him at all. On the contrary, it protected him so that he could exchange with peace of mind. The moment he came into contact with the statue, Chunzong saw a list. The list was clearly divided into layers. The lowest exchange required 10 world seal fragments. The highest exchange required 1,000 world seal fragments. Chunzong didn't know whether it was easy to get 1,000 world seal fragments, but 10 world seal fragments shouldn't be difficult. Chunzong immediately looked at it carefully. He started from the top. At the top, there was only one item that was worth 1,000 world seal fragments. It looked like a scroll. It was completely black, and he couldn't sense any aura from it. There was no information about it either. All in all, it was just a scroll, nothing more. However, since it was worth 1,000 world seal fragments, it must be quite extraordinary. Chunzong could only look at it enviously. On the next layer, there were 3 items that were worth 900 world seal fragments. On the next layer, there were 7 items that were worth 800 world seal fragments. From the 100 world seal fragments, there would be 50 world seal fragments, and below that, there would be 10 world seal fragments. The items that were worth 10 world seal fragments were the most, and there were hundreds of them. Chapter 25:51. The outbreak will start tomorrow. Everyone, get your monthly votes ready. When Chunzong's hand left the world god statue, the dim light also slowly faded. After about 3 breaths, it completely disappeared. What did you exchange for? Hand it over, and I'll spare your life. A cold aura immediately locked onto Chunzong. It filled the air, and there was nowhere to hide. His voice was extremely cold and full of killing intent. If I said that I didn't exchange anything, would you believe me? Shenzong stared at the other party and smiled slightly. The other party's answer was to directly attack. A cold light tore through the void in an instant without mercy. In such a place, it was not the outside world. There was no way to know who killed who. Since the other party did not know what was good for him and did not want to hand it over, he could only kill him and search through the other party's storage divine item. The moment the other party made his move, he was horrified. A wisp of extremely cold and sharp sword light that carried an extremely terrifying might directly slash towards him. The head-on sword was majestic and domineering. The sword momentum was vigorous and the sword pressure was vast. Suddenly, the other party felt that it was difficult to breathe, as if the air in front of him had been sucked dry. He retreated, spun, and swept again. The sharp sword broke through the air and condensed into a black line. Suddenly, it cut towards Chunzong's throat and was about to kill him. However, Chunzong's majestic sword attack changed in an instant. It was as if fine steel had turned soft. The vigorous and domineering sword momentum also became light, agile, and unpredictable. This was the switch of the world sword technique to the heart sword technique. The transformation of power into skill was extremely smooth. There was no delay at all. It went with the flow as if it was made by nature. Explode. The other party released the primordial spirit Dharma form, which was 100 feet tall. The tyrannical power swept around in an instant. The cold aura seemed to freeze everything. A gust of coldness swept over. Shenzong also activated two great divine forms at the same time. The erratic heart sword technique was switched to the domineering world sword technique. Slash. This sword was extremely domineering. The sword momentum shrouded, and the sword pressure was vigorous. Suddenly, all the coldness was dispersed and directly slashed down. It cannot be blocked. Retreat. However, the other party discovered that it was difficult for him to retreat. The power of that sword was too shocking. It directly enveloped an area and was extremely tyrannical. Resist. Under this sword, a tyrannical power erupted. Borrowing the power of this sword, the opponent's speed became even faster. Divine light flashed in Chunzong's eyes. Immediately after, a wisp of divine light appeared on the blade of his sword like water. The sword seemed to be moving slowly as it pierced forward. Vaguely, there seemed to be the chill of the night wind spreading out and the sound of drizzling rain spreading out. A stormy night in the small tower. When the sword was unleashed, the sword light was somewhat illusory, as if it had dispersed and permeated the surroundings. The other party was instantly stunned, and a wisp of confusion appeared in his eyes. His 30 tall, primordial spirit Dharma idol also started to fluctuate as if it was about to dissipate. Divine will attack. Moreover, this sword had surpassed the 10th order AO Wu and reached the level of an 11th order AO Wu. Chunzong had personally witnessed the battle between senior brother Yuan Jin and the dragon-determining swordsman. He had witnessed the dragon-determining swordsman's superb swordsmanship and strength. After returning to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, he went into seclusion and had a burst of inspiration. He seized the opportunity and raised a stormy night in the small tower to the level of an 11th order AO Wu. That was the level of the final state. Although it had barely reached the level of the final state, its power was not something that a 10th order AO Wu of the small state could compare to. Even though Chunzong's divine will was only at the small state, it was difficult for him to fully unleash the power of a final state AO Wu. However, its power was still very shocking. The sword light flashed, and when the confusion in the other party's eyes disappeared, the sword had already pierced through his glabella. A stormy night in the small tower was a divine will attack AO Wu. Although its direct killing power was not very strong, it was not weak either. In a situation where the other party could not resist, it killed him directly. Not only did he fail to kill the other party, he was also killed. This was how cruel it was. Chunzong would not show any mercy to those who wanted to kill him. After killing the other party, Chunzong took away the other party's storage device and took away the things inside. My luck is not bad. Chunzong's eyes lit up. This was because there were 2 fragments of the world seal in the other party's storage device. In total, he had used 3 fragments. There were faintly discernible patterns on the 3 fragments of the world seal. Chunzong stared at them carefully, and the feeling of understanding became clearer. However, it seemed that there was something missing, and it could not really appear. It was as if there was a layer of invisible film between them. It seems that it is still not enough, Chunzong said to himself as he put away the 3 fragments of the world seal. The lowest exchange price at the world deity statue was 10 fragments of the world seal. 3 fragments were far from enough. In that case, he would have to look for more fragments of the world seal. This junior is quite interesting. He cultivates both chi refining and body refining at the same time, and he has mastered 3 great paths. One of them is the world path. Not bad, not bad. He has mastered 2 great paths of sword arts and can switch between them freely. His attainments in sword principle are quite profound. His foundation is very solid. In the world hall, 3 voices sounded. They were talking to each other, but the others could not hear them. Not bad. Put him in the observation list again. If his performance is not bad, then we can consider giving him a chance. Then it's settled. Including him, there are 5 people. I wonder if there is anyone else who is qualified. The voices of conversation also fell silent. Chunzong didn't know that he had unknowingly become the target of the mysterious existence in the world hall. This might be a good thing, but it might also not be a good thing. No one could say for sure before it happened. Not long after, Chunzong found another fragment of the world seal, but he also encountered a strong enemy. This strong enemy did not seem to be a practitioner from the outside world, but from the world hall. His whole body was covered in a pitch-black armor. The armor was covered with mysterious lines. He held a pitch-black axe and was walking toward Chunzong step by step. Every step he took, there would be a dull sound of gold and iron. It was as if there was a strong army. The sound entered Chunzong's ears and gave rise to an amazing momentum out of nowhere. It was cold and iron-blooded. Its aura was extremely shocking. It rushed toward Chunzong like a torrent. In an instant, Chunzong seemed to see a river of blood and floating bones. Chunzong quickly put away the fragment of the world seal. His face was grave and cold. The black-armored man suddenly took a step forward, and his speed increased to the maximum in an instant. He drew out a phantom of flowing light and directly closed in on Chunzong. The large axe in his hand was also raised, and an extremely cold light streaked across the void, like a dark crescent moon slashing down from the sky. The whistling sound was like the roar of ghosts. The cold wind was blowing. The arc light was so shocking that it seemed to cut through the void. Chunzong's face changed greatly. He activated his divine form. He pulled out his sword and waved it. The world swordsmanship. The sword and the axe collided in an instant. An extremely overbearing and violent force burst out in an instant. It rushed toward Chunzong and forced him to step back. However, the terrifying force was still attacking Chunzong, trying to break his muscles and bones. So powerful! Chunzong suddenly gasped. He was secretly shocked, but he was not afraid at all. On the contrary, there was a flash of light in his eyes. The sword essence rushed to the sky, as if it could break everything. He waved his sword again. The sword light was overbearing and vigorous. The black-armored man chopped his axe again. It seemed to cut through the void. Its power was extremely shocking. Chunzong only used the world sword art. The black-armored man did not use Ao Wu's martial arts. He only used basic martial arts. However, under the extremely powerful force, it was extremely terrifying. The axe seemed to be fatal. It was as if it was going to cut Chunzong in half. The world sword art focused on power and sword momentum. Chunzong did not retreat. His sword met the attack head-on. However, the black-armored man's strength was too strong. Every time he met the black-armored man, he would be pushed back a few steps. Soon after, the black-armored giant axe was raised high. A wisp of dark energy raged like a storm and instantly gathered on the blade of the axe. The aura that spread out had a domineering aura that could split the heavens and the earth. This caused Chun Zong's expression to change drastically as all the muscles in his body tensed up. Chop! The energy on the black-armored man's axe was condensed to the extreme. It became pitch black, as if it could swallow all the light. Then it chopped down fiercely. The axe seemed to be able to split heaven and earth. It was unstoppable. Chun Zong was not afraid at all. He attacked with his sword directly. Ao Wu, the top 10th level, attacked with Heavenly Wind Strike. The sword light was shattered in an instant, and the extremely shocking axe light broke through the air, as if it could split a mountain, and immediately sent Chun Zong flying. The moment he flew back, Chun Zong's figure also became erratic. In order to dissipate the shocking impact, he stomped on the wall with his feet and instantly burst out with a shocking power. He suddenly rushed out and slashed out with his sword. A dazzling sword light suddenly flashed. It tore through the void like a bolt of lightning. It was extremely condensed, but it was not straight. Instead, it meandered through the void as if it was alive. The tip of the sword was as sharp as the tip of a sword. It was as agile and light as a swan. Ao Wu, the top 10th level, attacked with Lightning Slash. This attack was the combination of Chun Zong's Extreme Break and Lightning Slash. It not only had amazing speed, but also terrifying sharpness. It was also as agile and unpredictable as a swan. The sword directly struck the center of the black-armored man's forehead, but Chun Zong's expression suddenly changed. This extremely sharp sword had actually been blocked. Not only was it unable to penetrate the black-armored man's forehead, but it had even only left a faint mark on the black-armored man's armor. What an amazing defensive power. Boom! Another axe attack. The black-armored man did not care about the attack at all. He directly counterattacked. The big axe was overbearing and violent. If he was hit, Chun Zong knew that his 9 mysterious body protection technique might not be able to withstand it. Even if he did not die, he would be injured. In an instant, Chun Zong used the heart swordsmanship. He sensed the surroundings and avoided the axe attack. Then, he guided the attack to close the distance. The mystery of the heart swordsmanship was displayed incisively and vividly. However, Chun Zong also realized that it was too difficult for him to guide the black-armored man's attack with the power of the heart swordsmanship of the basic level. It felt like a child dragging a heavy object. The black-armored man's defense was amazing and his strength was tyrannical. Only his speed was slow, but it was not enough to be a fatal weakness. A night's wind and rain in the small building. When the 11th level Ao Wu was used, the black-armored man only paused for a moment. Then, he waved his big axe again. Obviously, Chun Zong's divine intent attack was no threat to him. Retreat. Chun Zong instantly distanced himself from the black-armored man. He put his left index and middle fingers together like a sword and suddenly fell on the sword. A faint light like water appeared, but it was filled with an amazing sharpness. Literature Museum. Chapter 2552. Exploding will make you happy, and voting will make the dominator of 6 realms even happier. Sword Dao Tongshan Exploding Trailer, currently in progress. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 2553. The First Explosion. The first level of the sword sharpening technique. Wind Slash, Absolute Mark. This move was also a top 10th level Ao Wu. It was a move that focused on cutting and sharpness. Under the enhancement of the sword sharpening technique, its power was doubled. Because before, even the 9 sword shadows of the 9-fold mixed killing secret method could not break the defense of the black-armored man. It was too tough. The sword directly landed on the black-armored man's body. The sword light instantly shattered like stardust. A wave of energy rebounded, causing the sword to tremble violently. The energy surged, causing Chunzong's hand to go numb. The sword almost flew out of his hand. A light sword mark appeared on the black-armored man. Sure enough, in terms of instantaneous attack power, the sword sharpening technique could not be compared with the ninefold mixed killing secret method. The ninefold mixed killing secret method relied on multiple attacks, one after another. When practiced to the peak, plus the physical attack, there would be 10 attacks. If they hit the same spot at the same time, it was very possible to break it. However, once the target's defense was too strong, it would be difficult to break it. The sword sharpening technique, on the other hand, doubled the power of one attack in an instant. It was like a fatal blow. Both of them had their own merits and uses. If one had to say which was stronger, at least the first level of the sword sharpening technique could not suppress the ninefold mixed killing secret method. The black-armored man's power was strong, his defense was unparalleled, and his divine will attack was ineffective. The black-armored man was only slower than Chunzong. No matter how hard Chunzong attacked, the black-armored man could not be broken at all. Even if he performed the sword sharpening technique, he could only leave a light sword mark. This situation was simply unsolvable. Perhaps the combination of the ninefold mixed killing secret method and the sword sharpening technique could break it. Or maybe the sword sharpening technique could reach the second level and burst out more power. In short, no matter what, Chunzong could not do it now. After a fierce battle, his strength was constantly consumed. Chunzong also realized this. He decisively performed the 9-void extreme escape technique and flew away at an amazing speed, leaving the black-armored man far behind. However, not long after, when Chunzong's power recovered, Chunzong found another World Seal fragment. Accompanying the World Seal fragment was another black-armored man. They looked exactly the same, but why did Chunzong think that it was another black armor man? It was because this black armor man was holding a spear instead of a battle axe. When the black-armored man saw Chunzong, he didn't say a word, or rather, he didn't know how to speak at all. He suddenly stomped his feet, and the incomparably hard ground seemed to shake. His body and spear became one, and he let out an extremely shocking scream, as if he was a fierce beast from ancient times. His aura was extremely fierce and terrifying. The spear was like an evil dragon coming out of the abyss, piercing through the sky in an instant. Its murderous intent was awe-inspiring, like a tidal wave attacking. The spear's momentum was astonishing, as if it could break the stars. Suddenly, Chunzong's muscles all over his body tightened, his expression stern. Chunzong activated the heart sword technique and sensed his surroundings. The long spear pierced through the air with astonishing power, as if it could pierce through everything. It was so terrifying that it made Chunzong's heart tremble. After dodging, he unleashed his world sword technique and slashed down. Fierce battle. Chunzong found that the spear-wielding black armor man's strength was not inferior to the battle-axe black armor man at all, but their strengths were different. The battle-axe black armor man's strength was tyrannical, but his speed was slower. However, the spear-wielding black armor man's strength was inferior, but his speed was faster, and his defensive power was the same. The unbreakable defense made Chunzong feel helpless. Fierce battle. After a fierce battle, Chunzong escaped again. Fortunately, Chunzong had cultivated the 9-void extreme escape technique to the 6th level, so he could erupt with 6 times the speed limit and shake off the spear-wielding black armor man. What happened next made Chunzong realize that something was wrong. It was completely wrong, as if he was being targeted. Every time he found a fragment of the world seal, a black-armored man would appear and directly attack him. The battle-axe black armor man, the spear black armor man, the long saber black armor man, the sword black armor man, the heavy shield black armor man, the battle hammer black armor man. Chunzong fought fiercely with all kinds of black-armored men, but he could not really break the black armor of any of them. However, unknowingly, Chunzong's swordsmanship was greatly improved. The world sword technique was gradually improved from the entry level to the small success level. Chunzong also obtained 10 fragments of the World Seal, which met the minimum exchange requirement. However, before exchanging, Chunzong first took out the fragments and looked at them carefully. Then he tried again and again and really pieced them together into a bigger fragment. He stared at the lines on the fragment, which were more complete, and the veins were clearer. The mystery contained in them was indescribable. Boom! Chunzong felt as if a corner of the world flashed in front of his eyes, but it was vast and boundless. The impact it brought was extremely shocking. The 10 divine lines of the world, Tao, suddenly condensed and released an amazing aura fluctuation. They were like real dragons, and the light shone in all directions. In an instant, countless insights emerged, as if some kind of shackle had been broken. Chunzong felt that his understanding of the World Sword technique had directly improved to a new level. Small success. The World Sword technique had also improved to the small success level, which was on par with the heart swordsmanship. The power of each stroke of the World Sword technique at the small success level was obviously more powerful than the heart swordsmanship, but in terms of skill changes and so on, it was not as good as the heart swordsmanship. Of course, the two swordsmanships each had their own merits. It was not about which was stronger or weaker, but how to use it. When the World Sword technique broke through to the small success level, the lines of the 10 fragments of the World Seal seemed to have become ordinary and no longer had any mystery. However, Chunzong knew that it was not that they had become ordinary, but that his understanding of the world Tao had improved to a new level. Therefore, the mystery of the lines could no longer bring him any inspiration. The fragments of the World Seal. Chunzong's eyes suddenly shone with a piercing light. There was no doubt that the fragments of the World Seal could not only be used as a currency for exchange, but also had amazing features. However, it was not clear whether it was useful for everyone or only for those who comprehended the world Tao. The mysteries contained in the lines of the 10 fragments of the World Seal had brought him so much inspiration. What if there were 20 fragments? 30 fragments? 100 fragments? 1,000 fragments? For a moment, Chunzong's heart was burning with passion. However, even if the World Sword technique had broken through to the small success level, Chunzong knew that he was no match for those black armor guards. This boy's performance is quite good. I suggest that we give him a chance directly. In the World Hall, one of the 3 voices that had been silent before sounded again, full of vigor. He is a little weak because he can't defeat the black armor guards. However, he can be inspired by the lines of the fragments of the World Seal. He does indeed have outstanding comprehension ability. With such comprehension ability, he is indeed qualified to be given chance. In that case, when he starts to exchange, no matter what he exchanges, give that thing to him. That will be interesting. As soon as the voice fell, there were a few mischievous laughs. Immediately, there was silence again, and no one else heard it. There are no more black armor guards. Chunzong continued to look for the fragments of the World Seal and found that there were no more black armor guards. Previously, not long after he recovered his strength, he would be attacked by the black armor guards. However, after a long time, no black armor guards appeared. The feeling of being controlled became more and more obvious. Chunzong's expression did not change, but his heart trembled. Since stepping into the World Hall, the feeling of being unable to grasp became more and more obvious. Chunzong took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He did not speak, but his fighting spirit was aroused. Now that he had entered this place, he did not know how to leave. Thus, he could only continue. According to what the primitive emperor said, there was no special danger or conspiracy. Perhaps it was just a secret arrangement. Not long after, Chunzong did not encounter any black armor guards. Instead, he encountered a rogue cultivator. The rogue cultivator stared at Chunzong with a vigilant look. However, he did not take the initiative to attack. Instead, he observed Chunzong's movements. The rogue cultivator did not take the initiative to attack, nor did he show any hostility. Chunzong usually did not take the initiative to attack. As for the vigilant look, it was normal. After all, they did not know each other. And in such a place with opportunities, anyone could become an enemy. Sometimes, even if you did not attack others, others would attack you. Perhaps one should not have the intention to harm others, but one must be vigilant. Sometimes, even relatives and friends would turn against each other. The two of them passed by each other. They did not attack each other, and gradually went away. Chunzong did not care, but the rogue cultivator breathed a sigh of relief. Searching, fighting time passed. With the sixth layer of the 9 Void Extreme Escape technique, even if he encountered an expert of the High Realm who was not his opponent, Chunzong could quickly escape and use the terrain of the World Hall to get rid of his opponent. After all, the World Hall was too much like a maze. A maze meant that it was easy to get lost. The light flashed and immediately dissipated, revealing Chunzong's figure. He fell directly and could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and he hurriedly took out a medicinal pill to recover his exhausted strength and heal his injuries. Earlier, Chunzong had encountered a disciple from the 7 Profound Sword Sect, and it was even a disciple at the Advanced Realm. The disciple's strength was extremely formidable, and even if Chunzong utilized the sword-sharpening technique to execute Stormwind in the pavilion, he was unable to defeat the disciple. He was only able to cause some trouble and buy some time so that he could execute the 9 Void Movement technique and flee. From this, it could be seen that Chunzong's current strength was very powerful among the low extremities. Even if he faced some high extremities, he would still be able to protect himself. He would not be so easily injured or even killed. While refining the medicinal pill, Chunzong saw a statue in front of him. It was the world deity statue, and he immediately rushed over. Now, he had accumulated 30 world seal fragments and had also comprehended the patterns on them. He had a deeper understanding of the world Tao, and this was his continuous accumulation. When his palm touched the world deity statue, the list of items appeared in front of him again. Chunzong scanned through the hundreds of items at the bottom of the list. His powerful memory immediately let Chunzong know that more than a dozen items were missing. They should have been exchanged by someone who had entered with him. Chapter 2554. Exploding the second bomb, begging for monthly votes. Chunzong calmed down and looked at the black token in his hand in surprise. His eyes were full of complicated emotions. In short, at that moment, Chunzong experienced countless fluctuations in his heart, like a surging tide. If he was not out of his mind, he should know very well that what he exchanged for was not this thing. Why did this thing appear? Chunzong thought for a moment. Among the hundreds of treasures that were worth 10 fragments of the world seal, there seemed to be no one like this token in his hand. Looking at it carefully, he saw that there were 2 ancient characters on the token, which seemed to contain supreme Taoist sense. In an instant, Chunzong was indescribably touched, but this touch could not bring Chunzong any enlightenment. It was as if there was a barrier, a threshold. The 2 characters were inheritance. When Chunzong stared at it, he had an impulse from the bottom of his heart to explore the secret. This impulse was also a kind of attraction, or even a kind of temptation. It was shaking Chunzong's heart, which made Chunzong very frightened. Who is joking with me? Chunzong looked up and glanced around, but he could only see the cold and dark walls. No one responded. Chunzong was more and more certain that someone was behind all this, but he did not know if he was the only one being targeted or if everyone who entered was targeted. Taking a deep breath, Chunzong suddenly threw away the black token in his hand with the word inheritance written on it. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared in front of his eyes. Those who disturb my heart will not be left alive. It was not that Chunzong was afraid, but it was too strange. Everything revealed a kind of strangeness. Something even stranger happened. Chunzong felt his hands sink. He could not help but look down and see that there was another black token in his hand. No, it should be the one he threw away just now. Is it targeting me? Chunzong revealed a faint smile. Soon after, it turned into determination. His eyes were like the tip of a sword as he stared at the pitch-black token. Since he couldn't shake them off, he would just have to see what they were up to. Soon after, Chunzong's energy surged and directly wrapped around the token. A suction force spread out from the token and absorbed Chunzong's energy. The two ancient words immediately emitted an intense light. The light surged like the waves of a long river, completely covering Chunzong's body. That power was so strong that there was no way to resist it. Chunzong only felt that his body was constantly leaping along with that power. It was as if he was traveling through time and space. It felt like an instant, but it also felt like 1,000 years. Chunzong appeared in a majestic hall that was several hundred meters tall. Furthermore, other than him, there were 5 other people. When a total of 6 people appeared in the hall, their faces were either filled with surprise or vigilance. They first sized each other up before quickly scanning their surroundings. When Chunzong saw these 5 people, his heart was in turmoil. An expert. These 5 people were all experts, and they all posed a great threat to Lu Yin. They were all at least at the high extreme level. In fact, 2 of them even posed a threat to him. They were so strong that they could not be resisted. Transcendent Realm. Including himself, there were 2 Transcendent Realm, 3 Final Realm, and 1 Dawn Realm. Why were they here? There should be quite a number of people who entered the World Hall. If there weren't tens of thousands, there should be at least thousands. Why were there only 6 people here? Furthermore, where was this place? Chunzong couldn't help but quickly scan his surroundings. This was a hall that was several hundred meters tall. It was empty all around, but there were a few closed doors scattered around. Coincidentally, there were a total of 6 doors. Congratulations on being chosen. You are qualified to receive the true inheritance of the World Lord. A powerful voice suddenly resounded out, and it seemed to have come from all directions within the hall. It was vast, mighty, and deafening, and its impetus and content caused the 6 of them to be extremely shocked, causing their minds to fluctuate like the tide. The true inheritance? Aren't those from before? One of the Final Realm asked subconsciously. Of course not. Those were just opportunities for the fated people who entered the World Hall. The second voice sounded with a slight smile. This is the middle hall of the World Hall. It is the core of the world mystery land and the true inheritance of the World Lord. Why can we come here? A Transcendent Realm asked calmly. Because you have all comprehended the world path and passed the test. The third voice was a woman's voice. It sounded gentle. The 6 people suddenly understood. Chunzong recalled that he had encountered the black armored men. Could that be the so-called test? Looking at the thoughtful expressions of the other 5 people, it was likely that they had encountered the same situation as him and had encountered the black armor man or something similar. The true inheritance of the world Lord isn't so easy to obtain. Even if you have passed the preliminary test, you only have the basic qualifications. The vigorous voice continued. There are 6 doors here, representing 6 types of tests. Only one person can enter each door. Only by passing this test can you obtain part of the true inheritance. No one found it strange. The World Lord was a 7th Realm Emperor. How could the true inheritance he left behind be so easy to obtain? The Tao wasn't passed down easily. This truth was universal, whether it was in the void or in the universe. Things that were too easy to obtain were often worthless. Even if they were originally valuable, they might become worthless because things that were too easy to obtain were not valued that much. In addition, when a powerhouse left behind his own inheritance, he wouldn't want it to be easily obtained, especially by mediocre people. Only those who were more outstanding in all aspects to a certain extent were qualified to obtain the inheritance. This way, it wouldn't be a disgrace to his inheritance and tarnish his reputation as an emperor. Many powerhouses still cared about their reputation even after death. There were very few who didn't care about their reputation. These 6 doors are courage, wisdom, dominance, space, light, and destruction. As the voice sounded, an ancient word full of charm appeared on the first door. Courage. When this word appeared, It immediately filled the air with a kind of aura. It was like the aura of a brave man who was fearless and fearless. Immediately after, an ancient and mysterious word appeared on the second door. Wisdom. After that word appeared, the aura that filled the air had a kind of wisdom and wisdom. The aura that appeared on the third door was dominance. The aura that filled the air had a kind of peerless dominance. It was as if nothing could stop it, and everything would be suppressed and crushed. The word that appeared on the fourth door was empty. It was empty. It was as if nothing existed, yet it was as if everything existed. The word that appeared on the fifth door was light. The aura that filled the air was as if everything was clear, understood, and understood. The word that appeared on the sixth door was destruction. It filled the air with a kind of shocking aura that destroyed everything. 6 doors, 6 words, 6 auras, 6 tests. Choose. The vigorous voice sounded again. Pass this test, and you can obtain part of the World Lord's true inheritance. How can we get all of it? A Supreme Realm powerhouse asked. Let's talk about it after you pass this test and get part of it. The vigorous voice seemed to have a hint of mockery. It seemed to be saying that the other party was biting off more than they could chew. He had not even passed this test and was already dreaming of other things. In fact, he might not even pass this test. Then, the 2 Supreme Realms moved and immediately flew forward. They chose courage and light, respectively. The 3 Supreme Realms also moved in an instant and immediately rushed to different doors. The aura that the 6 words emitted was different. The test that they represented was also different. However, as to what kind of test it was, they did not know. Shenzong also moved. He was very fast and flew out. Originally, Shenzong had his eyes on the door with the word light. In the end, it was snatched away by the Supreme Realm powerhouse. The second choice was the dominance door. However, one of the Supreme Realm powerhouses also had his eyes on the dominance door. Seeing that Shenzong was vainly trying to compete with him, the Supreme Realm powerhouse was instantly enraged and pushed out his palm. Scram! That palm contained astonishing power. It was as if it could flatten everything. It was like an invisible mountain that pushed horizontally. The extremely tyrannical force made Shenzong suffocate. Clang! The long sound of sword suddenly rang out. An illusory sword light flickered. The light dimmed and became as dark as night. There was a cool breeze and a drizzle. A night of wind and rain in the small tower. The attack of the 11th level AO Wu's divine intent. The opponent was an 11th level Supreme Realm powerhouse. When faced with this sword, he was also affected in an instant. His eyes blurred for a moment. The palm that was pushed horizontally also paused slightly. As the force fluctuated, the person's speed was also slowed down by a breath. A breath's time was enough. 9 spaces extreme escape technique. Shenzong immediately ignited his power and directly exploded with 6 times the speed limit. Like a flash of sword light, he flew rapidly towards the dominance door. Damn you! The Supreme Realm powerhouse's face was ashen. He was furious. He had his eyes on the dominance door. Now that it had been snatched away by a Supreme Realm powerhouse, he could not restrain his anger. Unfortunately, Shenzong had already reached the dominance door. He directly pushed it open and entered it. Helpless, the Supreme Realm powerhouse could only rush towards the last door, which was the space door. He originally did not want to choose this door because he was not used to the aura of the space door. But now this was the only door left. He had no choice but to choose, unless he gave up. There were tests left and right. He might as well take a gamble. In an instant, all 6 of them entered the 6 doors. I wonder if all 6 of them can pass this test. The vigorous voice rang out again. Difficult. A slightly chuckling voice followed. If half of them can pass the test, it will be considered not bad. Half of the 6 people meant that there were 3 of them. In other words, the difficulty of the test would be very high. After all, the 6 of them were chosen from many people. Those who could enter the world's secret territory were extraordinary. Of course, it was not that there was no one more outstanding than the 6 of them. It was just that those people had not comprehended the world Tao. It was not easy to comprehend and master the world Tao. It was much more difficult than comprehending and mastering the 5 elements Tao. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse, you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.